Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the semi-finals of the Mattel 2019 World Scrabble Championship, seeing the matchup between the greatest of all time, Nigel Richards, and Northern Ireland's own Paul Gallen, in my opinion one of the very best players never to have won this title. An interesting matchup between the pure seething passion and energy of Nigel Richards and the cool, calm collectedness of Paul Gallen, as Nigel opens the proceedings.
Yeah, and Nigel was taken to 3 games by the 13-year-old Syed Ahmad Ali in the quarterfinals, and Paul Gallen came back from an opening round loss against Jason Keller and won the next 2 to earn his place here.
Yeah, absolutely. Nigel immediately lining up the highest scoring player by far of Exedra. 44 points. Quackle doesn't recognise the play though. It feels that he's misoriented it and it should therefore be challenged off the board. But there you go. Each to his own.
Anecdotally, it seems that when a player opens vertically, the board has a different shape than if a player opens horizontally. And mathematically, you know, the board is rotationally symmetric, so that's not actually a thing. But it just kind of feels that way. Then when you let Nigel go first, the board turns into something that's to his advantage later in the game.
Yeah.
The two are probably not related.
No, you would hope not.
There are some folks who insist that there's a disadvantage to opening vertically in that having your tiles lined up horizontally on your rack, it makes it a little bit easier to see the possible 8-letter bingos through the vertically oriented word, but I don't think there's really much of a difference either way.
No, absolutely. Paul not afforded either of the floaters that he needs, either a C for Kuti or an N for Luteolin. I mean, it could be Kutili, I don't know, just pronouncing it French. Lee. I mean, Nigel's already lined up. Nigel tends to do this, he tends to already line up his play on his rack, so he's got Fiery lined up, which would perfectly parallel down the right hand side of Exedra. What's Paul likely to be looking at doing? Maybe utilising the E hook on Exedra.
Could play Lute or Lilo parallel. Toluol. That's not right. That would put the O on the D9 square, where you don't really want it to be. No, that's too many letters.
Yep. You need another out. Something like Outlie and Exedra, maybe. Blow the board wide open. Probably the highest score is maybe X-Toll, 2 L's. .26 points, but keeping UI not a good choice.
Something to be said for just playing Louis, keeping LT. That gives back the play at 8A from the triple, but it's, you know, not going to be too terrible.
Yeah, playing Liu.
Yeah.
Not opening too much.
Similarly, yep.
21, taking Paul to 21, unsurprisingly. So Nigel already with Fiery lined up on his rack, and HY is a great scoring keep. Not sure he's going to get much different. Yeah. Instantly bodging up the board. So already Paul a bonus behind on a board that has one floater or two floaters.
Yeah. Nigel's up to 83.
Yeah, Nigel 83, Paul 21.
Putting Paul 62 points adrift.
And Nigel picking out a powerful rack, Paul picking out a pretty bad rack.
Paul almost all of the way to Volost.
He's got to be careful. He doesn't want too much of that.
Yeah, it's got like overdog through the ER to open things up. Or Glover. Well,
That's
that'll do.
take the points.
Yeah.
And it does.
Quackle's favorite.
So it opens up an ES ending bingo line. What'll probably happen, or what could likely happen, is a 6 from the G. That'll open up a bunch of floaters.
Yeah.
That puts Paul up to 54. That 33-point play.
Do we see potentially a... Nah, that's silly. Never mind. Just looking for potential Nigel-esque Z setups here.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Many points, 42 points, putting Nigel to 125, 71 up. Paul here with coldest, but know how to play it.
After a play like that, obviously the first thing you do is figure out what you can do with that Z next to the colored square. That's where most of your thought goes to, even though sometimes your best play is elsewhere on the board. Often it's going to cover the Z and pick up a good score there.
Some options here. Maybe Zol off the Z.
Or Z off the Z.
Or Z off the Z, but
Yeah. You can play Do parallel. That leaves you pretty consonant heavy, but it'll probably score the most. It's 33.
with the advantage of setting up your CL along the side of it.
Yep.
But it's unlikely, I mean, if we look at where the scoring opportunities are on this board, it's unlikely that Nigel's going to play anywhere else, so you might set it up, but it's pretty easy with an A or an E or something to play down the side.
There's nothing really exciting to play from the G.
Yeah, and no sixes that fit in that 8A position from the triple on the left-hand side.
I mean, all in all, this is quite dull, so should we go to another match? Yeah, Zol is simming really high at the moment. Do is way down. I think the disadvantage of Doe, well, the advantage of Doe is its disadvantage as well. It's great because it scores a lot and it sets you up, but it also sets your opponent up, so your score differential, yeah. So then Paul picks the right play. Zol, you're giving nothing back with Zol. You're only creating opportunities for your S. It's a great choice. Worthy of a world champion. Come on, Paul. Takes Paul to 78. Paul's Nigel lines up Bluey and plays it pretty quickly. It's the highest scoring play, best keep, gives virtually nothing away.
Might also have considered Ubiety to just blow up the rack entirely down, making GU. It's probably a little bit more open than he wants to play at this point.
Yeah, it's not Nigel's style, really. Stylistically, he doesn't get out much. He likes to keep it closed. Scotted is not a word for those who are shouting at the board. Although one could say that David Eldar got scotted when Dave Wiegand played Sporrans against him earlier on.
One could say that, but one typically would choose not to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just out of courtesy to listeners and things.
Yeah.
Nigel's now up to 153. So a 75-point lead. Paul considering cost, I think, and Zol's. That U from Liu will continue to be useful for Paul. Paul's now considering playing cost with an E on the end. It's actually knowledge of these kinds of words that is probably most impressive in the top players, because you would deprioritise learning that as a word because it's such a bonusy rack. But it shows the depth and completeness of Paul's study. He chooses cost 41, which is the highest score available on the board by a matter of 10 points.
One of the many old Spencerian words. It's just an alternate spelling of coast.
Nigel, of course, sitting there ready with the K to hook EE.
Yeah, the bonuses are important because there's so many points, but you got to think in a game that of 12 turns or so, in a good game, 9 or 10 of them will be non-bonus words. So, figuring out ways like that to get every point in the majority of your turns that aren't bonuses is what sets the top players apart from everyone else.
Nigel playing Akita. Is that not a song by Sir Elton John, I believe? Akita will never know. No? No?
I believe that might be Nikita. But
this is why I'm sitting here and Elton John isn't. Good play by Nigel, 37. Highest score available. And Paul, drawn badly.
Puts Nigel up at 190 and Paul at 119.
Congratulations, Paul, on finding that wonderful play last turn. Now deal with this garbage. Here's your reward.
Meanwhile, Nigel being rewarded for his own good play. So if I was Paul, I'd be thinking about trying to tidy up my rack while also somehow developing the left-hand side of the board. It's really difficult because to really use the ER to extend out to the left, you've got to play 6 tiles onto it. Otherwise you're getting in the way with your own L that you've played. Merv is an option, or Merved. can throw Nigel's Bever back at him, but and Merv has certain benefits. It's not the easiest to block comprehensively from all angles. But the critical thing is he needs to make sure he's keeping multiple openings, well, open. Keeping the B gives him plays down from the Y of Bluey.
Paul has already spent quite a bit of time. He's taking down towards 13 minutes here. He has not had easy decisions to make, unfortunately.
No. I think Merv is a solid play, but Nigel's rack, well, he already had, I'm guessing it was Emicate he had on his rack, but he can keep them in exactly the same order and have Visicate now. And I definitely expect him to play Visicate, given what we were saying in the previous game about board defense, board development strategy. Oh, and Paul, 3 ends, not good.
It's raining ends.
Hallelujah.
Gallen, Lula. Yeah, I think Visicate here, just going back to what I was saying, will create, again, that closed box shape. I really think Nigel should play Go, because you see the number of closed boxes that he creates. He just never quite completes the loop. That's the problem. Maybe that's why he's not an international Go player as well. It's just that one square. Maybe that's why he keeps playing Scrabble at this level. It's just that one day that he's actually going to create a perfect Go board through Scrabble. Do we think he's going to play anything other than Visicate? I mean, the I is not left anywhere that the Q can really do any damage because the C is next to it. The Z is gone, the X is gone. Yeah, there's no defensive benefit. So yeah, Visicate, one of the multiple 74-point bonuses that are available, takes Nigel to 264 to Paul's 132. Nigel does have double Paul's score. It has to be said, Paul is being bagged. Paul's score is 132. Nigel is 264. Having said that he's being bagged, I think these kinds of racks, they tend to solve themselves. Oh, Nigel has Fengite if he has a floating E, which he's about to have. But will he see it? Who knows?
He hasn't lined it up yet.
If we whisper, he may not find it. Yeah, nice play. Bennett cleans up the rack.
Kind of handcuffed by those 3 ends. He's got to take a chance here.
Okay, so, I mean, assuming Nigel won't see Fengite, Paul's on 160 now.
It's little consolation to Paul, but often when your racks are terrible, it's easier to make more quality plays just because you have so many fewer options.
Yeah.
So even though he's getting bagged very badly in this game, he has knowledge of a job well done.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Nigel now, just, I don't know what he's considering. We're assuming he doesn't know Fengite. And Paul has been snafu'd. Yeah, there goes Fengite. Easily the best play. Anything worth considering. Nigel now drawing anus G R I. Ray guns. Quackle telling us now that Paul has a less than 1% chance of winning this. Nigel's on 330. If I was in Paul's shoes, I'd be... Well, for one thing, he'd have bare feet.
That's why they say, before you criticize someone, walk a mile in their shoes. That way you're a mile away and they
They
have
have
no
no
shoes.
shoes. Farn, higher score, sets up his S for Spa, although he's already got a play under Merv anyway. The less than 1% chance he's got is that he now plays a bonus on this move, opens up a 9 timer, and then plays the 9 timer. Well, he can't play a bonus on this move.
Down under 10 minutes. It's been the sort of game where the plays have been somewhat obvious, but they're not the ones that you want to be making just because you don't have the tiles to do what you want.
No, absolutely.
Whereas Nigel's playing very fast. His plays are pretty clear, and also they're scoring a lot of points. There's not really a reason to imagine that there's something better.
Maybe Paul's considering just playing the next moves really, really quickly and then sitting there staring at his opponent for 9 minutes for the last move. I don't know, it might be worth considering. Just try and psych him out. Who knows?
Give him a good hard frowning. Really, really make him feel bad about himself.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul choosing the best move. And really, I mean, Paul hasn't made a mistake in this game. He's played exceptionally strongly, consistent, made the right moves, but is massively behind. 330 to 202 now.
Two full bonuses behind. There is still the blank unseen, which Paul will need to draw to overcome this, but
Nigel,
a Q, that's almost like a blank.
Nigel could simply now play Unsay across the top of Fengite, which would totally destroy the board. All openings would be gone. The only options would be maybe down to the L. Yeah. Unsay is well in the high 90s of a win.
It's basically the Scrabble equivalent of lighting a match and throwing it in the middle of the board. Everything goes up in flames. It's gone.
Yep. Unfortunately, I think that's the case for this game. Unless Nigel thinks that ray guns is a word. No? Oh, okay. We try and derive hope from somewhere.
He knows a lot of words, but he doesn't know too many, which can also be a problem sometimes.
Yes.
I believe he spent his time recently, he's got all the words down. He's now working his way through the non-words, so he knows exactly what not to play.
Yeah.
He's memorized all the phonies.
He's looking at unsay now, I think. Yeah, there it goes. Great play. Takes Nigel to 365 to Paul's 202. Paul does have a 50-point quoad play, but really it's academic. I mean, I guess the nice thing about quoad is you are keeping the A, so you do have opportunities to play down onto the L of U, making Amma.
The second blank sitting on Nigel's rack.
Jargonia, is that good?
Oh, I think it is.
I would probably play it myself. Beautiful.
It is new.
So a lot of those 9 and 10 letter comparatives got added in the last update.
We can assume he's had a chance to look at the new words by now.
You would hope.
At least the short ones up through 9 letters.
Yeah.
Paul was considering Opaca there, which would block Jargonia. But he's going to play Quoad, because it's the right play. 50. Takes him to 252. So he's going to be thinking, great, I'm only 100 behind. Got an outside shot. Just give me the blank.
Oh. He's got one turn to draw a 9-timer through the J. Let's do it.
Oh.
I don't think that's going to do it.
And yeah. Nigel probably just making sure there aren't any. Are there any? Twin jets? No.
J in 5th position. It almost has to be some sort of jet.
There are only 44 words. 44 8-letter words with the J in the 5th position.
And he, sure enough, is playing Jargonia. What a ugly word. But beautiful in its own right. Taking Nigel to 447. But actually, this is now academic, really. It shouldn't have any effect on Paul whatsoever. This is one of those games. It was never going to go his way. He's challenged it, but it's new.
So that's to put Nigel at 452 and Paul at 252.
No, 447.
Oh, with the 5 points. For
Oh,
the
with the
challenge.
5 points. Sorry, yeah.
I always thought it would be cool to make myself some large novelty nickels, replicas of the U.S. coin, and every time I got a challenge wrong, I'd say, "There's your nickel, sir."
Yeah.
Carry a big sack of them around. It would have to be a big sack. I do tend to challenge an awful lot, so.
There we go. So Paul finds himself 200 points behind.
There are a few things in Scrabble that would not be approved by making them far more literal.
Interestingly, if Paul did have a 9-timer through the J now, he would only be 4 points up.
Hmm.
And he would still lose. And particularly given what Nigel's drawing from, it's a pretty good selection in the bag from Paul's point of view. Assuming Nigel draws the E. Paul just double checking how much Kate scored there. He'll be surprised when he catches up with the score. Nigel.
Very clunky rack for Nigel. He's in real trouble now.
Paul considering Jarp, I imagine, and looking at what's to come. Although Zhao's probably the most sensible move. Zhao also allowing you to hook with a P, making op.
So there's only 3 vowels in the unseen pool
Yeah.
to Paul and 10 consonants. But Zhao is still pretty good, even if he's looking to likely draw at least 2, probably 3 consonants.
Does anybody know if Nigel sets up his racks like this when people aren't watching? It's an interesting one.
I tried to figure that out once, but it turns out he figured out that I was watching. So.
Yeah.
He's very quantum in that way.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an interesting sitcom, Quantum Nigel.
Nigel playing roll to empty the bag. Interesting. From his point of view, well, actually, from his point of view, not a lot of potential bingos. Podesta.
You know, Paul does have one to go out.
Readopts is in the pool. Yeah, Paul does have his out bingo.
Yeah.
It's
Crucial error by Nigel.
Nigel at 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, so Nigel up to 4, 5, 6. Paul on 2, 8, 5. Yeah, not well. Maybe Nigel going for the flashy outplay, going for his own bingo. But we expect Paul to see Persuade. Everything falling in the right places. 90 points.
90 points and 24 from Nigel. So with the out bingo, Paul will end up only losing by about 60.
Now, has Nigel pressed his clock? Oh yeah, he has. Not sure if Paul has seen Persuade, because you would have thought he would play it immediately. He hasn't alphabetized his racks, which is what he usually does, which makes me think he's already got it set up to play something. date in the bottom right hand corner. I wouldn't judge either way, to be honest, at this point. I mean, the game's gone. You're just playing through the formality.
And rack makes 3 8s. The aforementioned Persuade, as well as Snapweed and Speedway. Fun set of 3 words.
Oh, that's a great shot. You get an insight into how Nigel works. Get your hand out of the way, Nigel. Okay. Yeah, you know that. Okay. What's he written up above his own name, I wonder? Can't quite see with the focus. Oh, NR51?
He's trying to, I guess, acquire a new nickname for himself. He wants everyone calling him Mr. 51 for some reason.
Oh, it might be an S1 or semi-final game 1.
That's possibly true.
That's
I think Stefan's is more likely, though. Let's not go into the realms of impossibility with your ridiculousness. Yeah, he's going to play date. Or is he? Spew. Sprue. Nah. Well, Sprue for 28 leaves date as an outplay. Nigel will be laughing to himself. Takes Paul to 3-1-3. There you go, even the best players in the world can make misses. I think this is really what sets Nigel apart. He's so consistent.
Yeah, but it's hard to fault a miss in a situation where the
Absolutely.
spread really doesn't matter and the outcome's not in question. You know, save your mental strength for the next game when it'll be some more interesting or important situations.
Plays to block. Never let it be said that Nigel is not generous. Does Paul have an outplay?
He has
Oh, Cadge.
a few.
Yeah.
A tad up top. I know he has DEA.
DA, yeah. Deer, Cadge. Yeah, Cadge is another point, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Well, game over. Nigel Richards ends up on 4-8-3. Paul Gallen on 3-4-4. Bit of a bagging for Paul. Should go away from this being positive, though. I don't think, apart from Persuade, when the game was already over, he played everything pretty as much as well as he could. Strong showing by both, obviously. But yeah, with that Visicate and Fengite back to back, Paul was always going to be up against it, and the brilliant Jargoneer
Mm-hmm.
as the coup de grace. Or the coup de Nige.
As we would say in the jargon of the game.
Are we going to see game 2 here, or are we going to switch to the other match, do you think?
I think we're going to switch to the other match.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So coming up, we'll see game 2 of David Eldar and Peter Armstrong.
Okay. Do we have updates on how game 1 is going, or?
I have not heard. Oh, there they are. Still studying the board intently as we proceed into our special bonus coverage.
David has not yet touched his banana, it's worth noting. He does have an infusion of potassium there, should he need it.
Does he often touch his banana when he's close to winning?
He fondles his rack. I mean, if his rack is full of tiles, he might need something else to cling on to. But
Yeah. Do you think Peter can smell his banana from there? I mean, it's quite close. Might be putting him off.
well, it could be that Peter has his own banana that's off camera, which could be obscuring the smell of the other banana.
Would Peter's be green, or would it have black spots on it like Eldar's?
I would assume it came from the same bunch. I believe we saw Koenig in here with his intent to distribute bananas.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, still got the skin on, so obviously he's not tucking into it yet.
It's a shame to see an untucked banana.
Yeah. So both of these looking, well, one looking distraught, one looking disinterested. Does this mean this has been a... Do we think Eldar is...
I think Eldar just has resting disinterested face.
Yeah.
You see Eldar has one tile which has no letter on it.
Huh.
It's always difficult when you draw those because they are worth 0 points.
Yeah, it's they're really disadvantageous to have.
And Peter's gone out immediately, which means that there's no pressure in the end game. So let's see who reaches for the... Reaches for the banana first.
Oh, we need to hire lip readers.
Quarterfinalist Harshan Namabadasuriya here suggests that Peter has won because of the body language. He's got a more open chest right now. He put his hands up to his ears earlier on as a subliminal na 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 na, which only you really see top players doing. Eldar looks confused, perplexed.
I recall famously in your match against Mark Nyman where you inflated like a puffer fish to assert your dominance.
This is very true, and then I let out a guttural roar afterwards.
They're both writing furiously.
This is probably some sort of speed poem Is the Scrabble just no longer presents any mystery for them. Quick, what rhymes with orange?
It's special in the semi-finals. The game is awarded to whoever writes the best poem with the words on the board at the end. But they only have 30 seconds to complete it.
There once was a man from Havana who had an inflatable banana. He turned up to Scrabble, the commentators babble. I can't think of anything that rhymes with banana. Oh, I tried, but it turned out I canna. So we have some chat on Facebook. Shelley Stevens rightly explaining that we do need more people laughing at our jokes. Some sort of laughing track in the background would really be really useful.
One thing I am noticing is Eldar has his phone out. Are we sure that the game is over? Because I think that might be a rules violation. If not, I don't think you're allowed to use electronic devices to look up words during the game.
No, but
not sure.
Pete's
I have not looked at the latest edition of the Wesper rules.
But Pete's trying to outphone him now. It's like, well, you've got that plain old thing. Look at my piece of orange plastic. Actually, is that not just a really old Game Boy? Is he just having a quick...
He's playing a little Tetris there.
Yeah, well...
You play with your banana and I'll Pokemon.
Right.
Yeah, it's sort of a triathlon here. There's the Scrabble game, then there's the poetry contest, and then there's the quick Tetris matchup.
Could it be like chess boxing, but you have Tetris Scrabble?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think definitely the pastel colours are winning, regardless. I mean, whatever the Scrabble result.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
David Eldar lubricating his throat for when he decides to eat the banana.
Mm-hmm.
David won. Okay. We have it on good authority that David won that. 478 to 337, which is why I was looking disinterested.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I am amused by the simplicity of this game.
He's not just going to be fondling a banana. I reckon he'll have a nice pear as well. Or an oogly.
Or an Ontario.
Oh, is that not, what is it? Something aggregated Drupal, an Ontario. Or an Ashen, or whatever it is. Nigel, over there, envious of Eldar's banana. I really want that banana. But no, it's still there. Oh well, I think Eldar's left his banana behind.
This could prove costly in the next round.
Are my plantain criminal thoughts in his mind, do you think? Well, the next game starts in 6 minutes, so I'm going to split for a couple.
All right, hello. This is Chris Slape with Harshan Lamabudasuria and Stefan Rao and Brett Smitheram over in the corner on Quackle. And we're ready for the second match of our semi-final. We'll be showing David Eldar and Peter Armstrong. David took the first of this match in a game that we spied on with our camera at the end. It was a 4-7-8 to 3-3-7 in the first one, so not a very close opener. David Eldar won by 141. This is a best of 5, so Peter can tie it up, or David can get to the brink of passing through to the finals in this round. But they will surely have at least a third game after this one.
So I actually lost my quarterfinal to Peter 2-1. Thought he played really well. I would imagine he's in a very positive frame of mind after that quarterfinal. I don't think he'll be overly upset or despondent after losing the first game in this matchup. I think for most players, losing like a close game, it's probably more upsetting than being beaten in a blowout. That's my personal kind of view. So he should be in a reasonable, focused frame of mind for this match, which is exactly what he needs to be in.
You would assume with the 140-point margin of victory, it was not like one crucial mistake that he made. So
Absolutely.
you can probably just shrug his shoulders, move on, and assume that this game will be a little bit better for him.
I think it looks like Peter's starting this game. Presumably David started the first game because he finished higher in the league phase of this tournament, which is what we've been told.
Yeah. There's something too that David Eldar says is that after you've lost a game, you always play the next one a little worse, and after you win a game, you play the next one a little better, just because it's impossible to get it out of that frame of mind. But certainly, if you've lost a close game and you're second guessing your decisions, that's much tougher than if you really didn't have many decisions and you just kind of put tiles on the board and didn't really draw much. The only issue is that if you have an extended streak of games like that, you start to expect the tile bag to spit out horrible things at you. But I don't think Peter would be in that place after having a really great day to make it into the knockouts and had good games in the quarterfinals. So he's probably in a pretty positive frame of mind.
I think this game is as much a test of your temperament, your composure, your attention, your concentration, as your word knowledge and the more technical aspects of playing the game. It's really hard to play accurate, good Scrabble if you're upset, distracted, worried. Having been composed like Paul Gallen showed us in the last game, it's massively helpful.
Yeah, there are lots of players I've known who've had really great word knowledge, had good strategy, all of that, but they couldn't bring the sustained mental focus. And so, you reach a level, it doesn't matter how many words you know, there's a level you can't get past unless you have that mental focus to be able to, find the right play and reason through a situation every time, even more so on the 6th day of a grueling event like this.
So Peter's options are restricted by having just the one vowel. So as it happens, he's actually gone for the top stemming choice. Scores 30, the highest score. The only kind of downside to this choice is the consonant heavy keep. Keeping four consonants, it could turn into a bingo if you pick 2 vowels, or you could be in a world of pain with a 1 vowel or 0 vowel keep. A pick even.
Yeah. The consonants he kept tend to go together, so even one vowel should give him something playable.
Mm-hmm.
There are certainly worse 4-consonant leaves you can have in the world, and
so
C is also going to play well with it, as we see he's drawn.
So technically, these consonants, HLRS, they're synergistic with each other. That's the technical description of them. They go well together.
Yeah, if you get into a more mathematical description, the point value of the leave is better than if they were different consonants
Correct.
that didn't go
Mhm.
together.
It's interesting that Peters opened vertically because he opened horizontally in all of my other games. So I wonder how he made that decision.
Yeah,
I'm
I don't
curious
know.
to know how he made that decision, really. Now, knowing David Eldar, generally speaking, if you open short against David, unless he's got a bonus, he's going to do his level best to reparallel. He does not like, he likes a, he's very similar to Nigel Richards in the way he opens the game. He likes playing short and closed.
Which is bad news for Peter. He has drawn a synergistic set of 7 tiles, but there are no 7-letter words there, although there are several 8s, but he is unlikely to get any of the floaters that he needs.
It looks like David's considering AT, ZA, and TAV, which should be obviously quite restrictive unless your opponent's got an A or a S. CUME is not a great keep, really. If he were to play TAV, he would be prioritizing defense over rack balance. It would be a defensive choice, which, as I said, is in keeping with David Eldar's style of opening play, in my opinion. So the Quackle sim likes Mauve, MAUVE, making AM and ZA. I'm thinking that David instinctively and viscerally dislikes that because it leaves the E next to the double letter square above the middle triple and hangs an E out for bonuses. It's not that's not the kind of play that David would be comfortable making.
Yeah, and I don't think you can draw much of an inference from Peter's rack from his opening play. He very well could have held on to a high consonant and played Waz. And as it were, he had the H in his leave, which, Waz will be the right play with a wide variety of opening racks.
Another very kind of different option is vacuum through the A of Waz. That keeps AE, which is nice, which is compatible with the board. It's reasonably it's all right. Sorry.
No, but he could do vacua into the A of Waz, which would probably be the best leave. His Mauve CT.
Yeah, fine.
Surprising.
He's gone for it. He's gone for the best equity option, so to speak, ignoring position. So I would say that's what we would call a fearless brave play, basically, preserving rack leave at the expense of defense and maximizing score. So Brett Smitheram, ex-world champion, he's pointed out that Peter's got Chervilles for an enormous score above 100. So this is a really good test of Peter's word knowledge and anagramming. It's a low probability bingo. It'll be extremely interesting to see whether he sees it and whether he'll be brave enough to play it.
Yeah, it's probably more intuitive to look through the E with a rack like that, but actually the V is where his most profitable play will be.
Fantastic. That's a strong play. That's a very strong world-class play by Peter.
Unsurprising that he would find it, though.
Yeah, it's the sort of play that you expect anybody in this position of this tournament to make. But yeah, it's a very, very strong play. Like you said, not a high probability bingo. It's a ways down in the word study. So full marks to Peter for finding that.
Scores are 144 for Peter and 27 for David.
It would be really nice to see some video footage of facial expressions after a play like Chervilles goes down. Some players don't react at all. Examples are Paul Gallen, Nigel Richards, and other players are quite expressive in response to good fortune and misfortune.
We have an early update from the other game. Nigel opened with Ass Lake and is now up 99 to 38 with Paul to play.
So there's a couple of options here. You can play Jism through the S of Sherwell's. Scoring well, keeping CENT, which is a synergistic bingo-friendly leave, and looks like Dave is going for that. It seems the obvious play to do on this board, and he's not taken very long over deciding to play that.
Yeah.
He's got a win percentage over the next 2 turns of 11% after Jism.
Yeah, at this point, David's going to be looking to either the C or the H to play a bonus through, or that line, or the J column, hooking to make AME or something like that. Without drawing an S to play mauves, it's a bit difficult. Also, there could be an E or an ED or ending bingo on the left side of WAS, now that we have EW in the book.
I don't know Peter very well, so when you're in this kind of situation early in the game, you're 120 up. There's two ways to play this. Either you can prioritize scoring and equity and play as if you weren't ahead and be attacking, or you can try and control the board like Nigel would do, giving up some points and giving up some rack leave. Do you guys know Peter well enough to predict what he's going to do here? Is he going to be shipping lots of points and leave to try and control the board, or will he just go all out, all guns blazing?
I haven't gotten a strong enough sense of Peter's game myself.
My guess is that he would play it more positionally,
Mm-hmm.
and take the score and the situation into account, and maybe give up a few points of equity here and there to.
Mm-hmm. So Crackle's recommending the Crackle Sim, the winning choice is playing down different options, playing down from the R of Sherwell's, and that would obviously, this is a reasonably close board, that it will be giving floaters additional bingo friendly floaters, which didn't previously exist. When you make an opening, it's helpful to think about, for example, if there are existing S hooks on the board already, creating a second S hook. It's not going to cause any additional damage, essentially. And if there's an existing E as a floater, then providing a second E as a floater is probably not going to hurt you defensively. But giving new floaters might cost you. So that's the way to think about making openings. Is there another similar opening on the board, and how many openings exist on the board as it is? Making an extra opening on a wide open board probably has no negative consequence.
Yeah, and playing down from the R like that would obscure the only S ending lane on the board at the expense of exposing a couple floaters.
An excellent point that Chris made earlier is that your average game has 12 turns, and of the 12 turns, your opponent's going to bingo between 2 and 3 times. Okay. So I think, so it looks like Peter's gone for Oculi, and it looks like he's trying to combine defense with keeping a nice leave of ATE.
Yeah, it takes out the S ending lane for 7s with Mauve, but also sets up a lane for a 7 that you can hook tiles that aren't an S, tiles that Peter has, like a T.
So David Eldar's taken less than 5 seconds to slap down his bingo. I think this is a characteristic feature of David Eldar's play. If he's sitting on a bingo, and if he recognizes that a new opportunity or a better opportunity for a better bingo does not materialize from the opponent's play, he will play it instantly, and he'll bank his time early in the game. This is something that he does consistently, that I've noticed. And I think he's right to do that. I think it's really important and valuable to bank time for the end game.
It's a good habit to get into. If it's an easy decision, don't waste time.
This position was quite instructive. So Peter gave up 10 to 15 points by trying to defend the S hook and the R hook on mauve on a board which had existing spots for sevens. And so he didn't sacrifice any leave. I think 80 is probably a decent leave. He sacrificed a ton of points, and in Scrabble, quite often in my experience, when you do that, you get punished elsewhere on the board, essentially.
Yeah, and keeping the better leave, it's paid off for Peter since he pulled a bonus that's going to fit.
The worst possible outcome would have been trying to block and keeping a rubbish set of tiles on your rack. Your opponent goes elsewhere, and you're sitting on junk. That's the worst scenario.
Yep. Yeah, really, it's early enough in the game that you can't be burning that much equity, where equity is the combination of the points that you score and the leave that you keep. Where Peter gave up points, but he has kept a better leave, so it's not as much of a sacrifice as some other plays might have been.
I guess the other way to look at this is that it's quite hard to judge over the board unless you're Nigel. How many points a particular position is worth compared to another particular position. So if you're not really sure about the evaluation, you're probably better off just taking the points as opposed to trying to defend a hard position.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of the hardest things to do in Scrabble is to evaluate the positions and turn that into a number of points. Points in terms of score and in terms of leave.
Just to point out that when you play 7 tiles like David's done, one of the problems with playing 7 tiles is you draw 7 random tiles. So on average, your rack is going to be worse after playing a bingo than after playing 3, 4, 5 tiles and keeping a balanced leave. And that's exactly what's happened here.
Yeah, and that's useful to know even for like the end game. When you're going into an end game, if your opponent hasn't bonused in a while, their rack is going to be better than the average of the unseen pool to you because they've been keeping the good stuff behind. Whereas if your opponent bonuses and pulls 7 random, then you know it's actually random.
It looks like Peter. So this is a excellent example of the role of variance and chaos in Scrabble. So David Eldar has played 7 tiles and drawn A, B, D, G, N, and X. And Peter Armstrong has played a similar bingo and drawn, not only has he drawn a bingo, but it's probably going to be a high-scoring bingo because of the extra scoring juice from the K. So we call this a post-bingo pickup. A post-bingo pickup is probably the purest expression of variance and luck in Scrabble. And this is a good example of that.
Yep.
And when you lay down the second consecutive bingo, that's where your more sarcastic opponents will make a comment like, "Oh, outstanding rack management."
I've read that comedians have high IQs than the average population. It takes a lot of good cognition to make jokes, good jokes, basically. And fortunately, there's a lot of smart, funny people in Scrabble. It's one of the benefits of playing Scrabble.
Unfortunately, none of those are in this room.
So in terms of David's options, this is a difficult rack. So this is classic David Eldar. He slaps down a bingo in 2 seconds flat. He's got a difficult rack, and he's appropriately spending a lot of time looking at what the best option for this rack is. So David's choice, he's got a choice of playing banding through the eye of oculi, or what he's done, which is playing bonding, and his choice is absolutely fine. It's got a win percentage of 7.5% compared to 8% with banding. That's not significantly different. And the equity valuation is only 6 points behind banding, which is probably not significantly different. So he's playing good Scrabble. That's a good choice. So in terms of what...
It's a good choice. It's unfortunately going to work out very poorly for him.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of what is done, hanging a G in the fourth position... I lost audio, guys. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
So in terms of the risk of a 9 timer, there's 2 blanks out. The G is actually an incredibly inflexible bingo tile. Hanging a G out in the 4th position with 2 blanks out, even with 2 blanks out, I would say it's low risk basically.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's an unreasonable decision, and he's chasing the game. He's got to increase volatility. So in terms of board management, I don't think what he did was an unreasonable thing to do.
Yeah, especially given that Peter had a random rack of 7 tiles.
Absolutely.
And like you said before, that's going to be, it's going to be the average of the bag. It's going to be worse than most racks that people have on average. This particular time, it's not going to work out that way, as Peter does have the 9 timer.
So Peter's thought process right now, he should be concentrating 100% on finding a 9 timer through that G. He should not be distracted by any of the other floaters. He shouldn't be thinking of 7s. He shouldn't be thinking of other 8s. His sole focus, his priority is making sure he's not missing a 9 timer through that G. And it's really hard to be distracted. There's lots of floaters on this board. There's a couple of spots of 7s. It's this is the type of board where when you have loads of different options, it's easier to make word finding errors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at this point in the game with 14 minutes on your clock, it's worth spending 2 or 3 minutes at least to make sure you've got this right, make sure you're not missing anything, especially holding a blank. Because missing a 9 timer like this, okay, yeah, if Peter plays something like Oilskin, he's in really strong position, but you don't want to miss the huge bonus that'll put the game away.
You wonder how many of his possible 7s he had cycled through while waiting for David to make his move. If he had seen Sun-like as a possibility, then the triple becomes very, very easy to see because it's just, of course, song-like.
The other kind of instructive thing about this situation is that I think a lot of Scrabble players, myself included, they actually struggle with racks with a blank on it. There are 26 possible different options. It's a lot of different permutations to go through. And if there's a few floaters to choose between, there's even more options. So actually playing accurate Scrabble with a blank on your rack, it's incredibly hard. So to get around that, you need a method, and the method in this case is, well, what's the high-scoring bingo going to look like? It's going to be a 9 timer with a G in the 4th position. So I got to work on that first before I think of anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about the power of process and routine and habit.
Yep. And with this rack, the G's in 4th position, you think the N is probably in 3rd position.
Absolutely.
And then you can kind of work it out from there. Maybe you'll look at like as a suffix when you have that in this situation, but certainly thinking something NG something and going from there is the way to think about it.
In David Eldar's words, if he plays a song like, it's going to be GGTY. He's found it.
Yeah.
So it is GGTY. Good game, thank you, on ISC for those who are not in the know. So it'll be interesting to see if David challenges this. He's probably going to challenge it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is he going to challenge?
He almost
He's
has
going to challenge.
Yes, it's game over. It's game over.
I'm a little biased because my name.
So the cameraman, he's taken our advice. He's panned to a close-up of David Eldar's face right after song like. Thanks guys, well done, good job. As I said, there are some players who would not react at all. Not many, there's some. Nigel, you wouldn't be able to tell looking at his face that someone's played a game-winning bingo against him. He would not flinch.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, this position. So song like, if you simulate to the end, I'm going to simulate this position to the end of the game to see what the win percentages are, although it may not be very accurate. So in this kind of situation, the next best bingo, which is Oilskin from N8, it doesn't lose many more games than song like. But I mean, Peter's going to be feeling great right now. He's going to be feeling really positive, full of energy. He's going to be in good mental shape for the rest of this match after what he's just done. This might have benefits beyond this game, what just happened.
Yeah, so that puts Peter at 396 with 163 points, including the 5-point challenge. And David Eldar's 151.
So now David, realistically, he's got to know that mathematically, his chances of winning after a song like, according to Quackle, is 0.0%. So David's going to know this, and knowing David, he's going to play super accurate Scrabble going forward. It's not going to affect him. He's just going to carry on playing excellent Scrabble.
Yeah, he'll probably also play quickly because he knows it doesn't matter and he's not going to waste his time and his energy, figuring out a difficult position. Which there's something to that. You have a finite amount of energy, and you don't want to waste it on a game that's lost.
Agreed. But he's going to try his best not to make any word finding errors.
Mm-hmm.
He won't spend too much time, choosing between similar words of a similar equity. He won't agonize over decision making, but I think it's going to be important to him not to make any word finding errors. I have Peter pegged as someone who is going to be playing better Scrabble when he's up, when he's doing well. So I would predict that he's going to play to a high standard going forward. I think song like beyond winning him this game, I think is going to keep him in good mental shape for game 3, 4, and 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is going to make the match very interesting. It's interesting to think about what's going through David Eldar's mind right now. I think he can be quite hard on himself.
Mm-hmm.
It might be that he's castigating himself for choosing bonding over banding down at the bottom of the board. It doesn't really matter for this game because mathematically this game is lost. But it's very important that he move on to the next game and not let this get him down.
Yep. And really, bonding seemed like a perfectly fine play.
Absolutely.
He can't fault himself for making that play. Peter had a random rack of 7 tiles. It happened to be the worst case scenario, but those are risks you have to take.
Scrabble is an incredibly hard game emotionally, and to be a good Scrabble player, you need to play bonding, be punished with a 9-timer, and then in a similar game, in a similar situation, if a similar word is the right option, you need to have the cojones to make the same choice again consistently. That's what you need to do to be a world-class Scrabble player. It's not just about being smart, it's about being together.
Mm-hmm.
As well.
Yeah.
And that's what Nigel's good at doing. He's got an exemplary temperament.
Yep, he has never been flapped. He is unflappable. At this point for Peter, I guess you're tempted to try and address that S-hook that Eldar just put up, but probably Groupie and Jag is just your normal play.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
If you can score and burn 6 tiles, bring the end of the game sooner.
Absolutely. And that's what Quackle's suggesting as well.
Yeah, nothing else is even close.
So Groupie is on equity value. It's 12 points better than Guru in the same position. And that jives with kind of our intuitive evaluation of the position, really. It scores really well, turns over 6 tiles. Positionally, it's very good, takes out a bingo line for 7s. It's nothing to fault, really, apart from a keep of a U, which is a bit of a yucky leave. But then all the U's are gone. It's the last U, it's the case U.
Yeah. One thing when you're ahead like this, playing as many tiles to shorten the game. Give your opponent the fewest number of turns to make up the difference. In this case, it's 200 points. It's very unlikely the distance will be made up. But in general, even if you're up 150, 100, play more tiles, speed the game along. Empty the bag as quickly as you can.
I think you're equally as likely to lose your focus and your concentration after playing a 9-timer and being euphoric compared to being 200 behind and being despondent. So a lot of players, they would play quickly, they would try to play intuitively, and probably make like word finding errors, in their euphoria, which is an equal risk to being despondent, the opposite.
That's also a reasonable play, playing pony there.
Yeah.
That double lane with the N is, the highest scoring lane.
Uh-huh.
If David came back and scored 110,
Mm-hmm.
that might start to make it a game again. So it's a very reasonable play for him. Keeping the two U's isn't,
Yeah, that's
isn't
the major
great.
downside. Yeah.
But the positional thought behind it makes a lot of sense.
And of course, you would think pony is a good play.
I do. I have a ponytail myself, so.
So David scores decently, opens a 7-letter file for his O, keeps a leave, which makes it very likely he'll bingo next turn. He's not got a realistic chance of winning this game as per the Quackle simulations. That's a good move. There's nothing to choose between the top few choices really. That's a good move. So Peter's drawn into junk. So it's interesting. If you keep a dodge leave and you draw more junk to go with it, it really slows you down. It slows down your momentum. You can't even defend. If your opponent makes an opening, it's going to be really hard to defend that opening with this rack. It's going to be difficult to score with this rack, and it's actually going to be quite difficult to balance the rack with a decent play. Peter's probably going to change, I would imagine. Not sure what the other options are.
Guile through the L.
Okay, yeah, sure.
That's got to be the play.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Kill the S hook, kill
Yeah.
the floating eye.
Yep. That's best. Is Eldar trying to be funny here, do you think?
Yeah, he probably is.
He probably is trying to make...
That's just blocked downiest.
Yeah, he had
All
Downiest
right.
ready to go.
It's not
Yeah.
trying to be funny.
Dunnest now.
All right.
Now he's dunnest. That's a good play. When you're behind, anytime you can play one tile and score well,
Yeah.
that's good. It's the opposite of what we were saying before. We want to
Yeah.
extend the game by
Mhm.
playing fewer tiles, everything else equal. Sometimes behind you need to play a bunch of tiles if there's good stuff. S's, blanks in the bag, and you need to draw them. But also you want to extend the game, give more
Mhm.
turns, give yourself more time to make up the
Mhm.
difference.
What Nigel would do in this kind of situation is he would typically start opening 9-timers, but that's going to be, I guess, theoretically you could open a 9-timer by playing down from the X to the right bottom of the board, but otherwise it's going to be hard. The bottom left and the bottom middle 9-timers are ruled out by oculi.
It's going to take a couple of turns at least to build out to the other ones in the upper left quadrant.
Yeah, that quadrant's pretty inaccessible right now.
The other options for David Eldar catching up, instead of playing 200 or 150 point play, is playing a number of different bingos, but at some point he's going to run out of tiles and run out of board. That's the issue. And that's where the point that Chris made earlier about turning over the tiles comes into play. If you have a 200 point lead and your opponent needs 2 or 3 bingos to catch up, by occupying the board, occupying territory and turning over tiles, you can reduce their chances of a big comeback. But on this board, the whole of the upper left quadrant is unoccupied.
Yeah, we got news from the other game. Paul Gallen has beaten Nigel 421 to 358.
Wow.
Fantastic.
So, yeah,
Fantastic.
after Nigel's opening bingo, Paul came back with a bingo bango 2 in a row later in the game and
Mhm.
pulled the second blank, and so that match is all tied up at 1.
So Quackle is suggesting AR down from between Biretta and Song-like. Scores 26, keeps AU, blocks a potential difficult bingo file for 7s, turns over 5 tiles. So Peter is expected to be 17 points further ahead after Ayara compared to David. So the other point about Ayara is that when you're defending a lead, most people think about defending bingos, but like what we said earlier, average game has 12 turns. Opponent's going to bingo on 2 of those 12 turns. They're going to be scoring with hotspots on the remaining 8 tiles. Not many people think about defending hotspots, and occupying that spot on the right side of the board, you're defending against a 40, 50, maybe even a 60-point play. That would be a non-bingo hotspot play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a play in that spot will score that much without using 7 tiles, and which keeps tiles in the bag, keeps the game going longer. So if you can take that out and take away the opportunity to score that much in one play.
Often when you're 100 to 150 ahead, the way you're going to lose that game is your opponent's going to narrow the lead with non-bingo plays to within a bingo, and then they will bingo or bingo out to catch you up that way. So you need to think very carefully about hotspot defense as well as bingo defense, given that you're defending against hotspot plays most of the time. And the best way to defend against a hotspot play is to take it yourself and score, which is the ancillary benefit.
Yep.
Good positive Scrabble. So that's a very reasonable choice. The Quackle sim likes it.
Mm-hmm.
It's comparable to Ayara. So again, you can see what David's doing here. He's got obvious bingo. He's worked out there are no other spots for other bingos. Slams it down, saves time. Classic David Eldar.
Yeah, Peter really couldn't do a whole lot about that particular hook that David had just opened up, so he decided to take out the hook on the bottom right, hooking the O on EX.
In terms of bingo files, I think it's helpful to look at, there are face value bingo files, and in this case, it's a bingo file on a double word score. So your bingos, they are going to score slightly more than an alternative file. That's something that Nigel's very good at doing. He's good at leaving open bingo files which are low scoring.
So right now we have 4-7-4 for Peter and 3-1-4 for David Eldar after that bonus.
All right, okay.
Nigel was 100 points up in the other game and he lost by 73.
Oh, wow. So yeah, after we have the annotation sheet from the Nigel-Paul game. Nigel's first rack was Ass-like, which he played for 73. And he, after playing Taluine a couple turns later, he had a 100-point lead on Paul. But Paul came back with Totaling and Dolmenic for back-to-back bonuses. Axe for 51, Upsy for 54, and then pulled the second blank. And yeah, 4-2-1 to 5-3-8 was the final. So
Sounds like an absolutely cracking game.
yeah, exciting comeback for Paul, and this best of 5 will go at least 4 now, which is good for all of us because that means we get to watch more Scrabble.
That's a good choice by Peter. Nearly all the best choices involve that quadrant of the board. That's absolutely fine.
He managed to pick all 3 of the remaining E's on that draw, and David is probably eyeing those 2 that he put down quite jealously.
So there are 17 tiles on Sane, which means there are 10 tiles in the bag. And this kind of illustrates the problem with mounting a big comeback. Eventually you run out of board and you run out of tiles. So an ideal comeback would be a number of 2-letter or 3-letter players scoring 50 each, followed by a bingo.
You could potentially play Loof alongside Denotes, setting up that A hook, which he hopes would stay there for him. Doesn't look like it would work based on what Peter has managed to draw this time around.
When you approach the end of the game like this, often you get into a situation where you have the last tile of a particular kind on your rack. So we call that the case letter, and that's important because as you approach the end of the game, you get opportunities if you're alert to the fact that you have a case letter to create a selfish hook, which you only can selfishly exploit. But to make that happen, you need to be concentrating hard and noticing and keeping an eye out for case letters on your tile tracking and on your rack.
Yeah, and those sorts of plays and creating those sorts of hooks are one thing that sets Nigel apart from everyone else. He sets up what he has really well. And especially if he has a certain letter that's a case letter. In one of his games against me this tournament, he played OWRE, one short of the double letter going down to the triple word. The P's were gone, and he was, of course, holding on to the case H. And it was a really tight board, and was able to take advantage and pull out the game.
So Crackle recommends opening a 9-timer in this situation by playing Fovea through the E of denotes. So if you were to open a 9-timer in, what you're hoping for really, for example, in this case it won't work. It's possible your opponent has all consonants, and you can put a consonant into the triple file. As long as the second letter on the adjoining column is a consonant also, there's a possibility that your opponent might find it impossible to blockade, or there's a possibility they might play a bonus elsewhere, or there's a possibility they might play a phony, essentially. So even if a game seems lost, I mean, Nigel in this situation, I'm sure he'll give himself at least a chance of winning by opening a 9-time in this situation. That's the only winning line here. And hope for the best, hope for a miracle.
Yep.
And people do make mistakes.
Yeah.
Sometimes the only way to win is to have your opponent make the mistake, so you want to give them every opportunity to make a mistake.
I mean, you can do a thought experiment. What would happen if my opponent phonied next turn? What are my win chances? How can I manufacture a chance of winning this game, assuming my opponent's going to phony? So that's the best case scenario for you. And you have to think about the best case scenario in this kind of extreme situation.
Yeah, one of the games that we saw on stream earlier in the last round of the main event, Peter Armstrong and Dave Koenig. Dave had an end game that was lost. He was behind by too much to catch up, but Peter did play a phony as the first play when the bag was empty. So yeah, can you set yourself up so that if your opponent scores 0 and you get another shot, can you take advantage? It's you'd think at this level, that wouldn't happen or whatever, but it does. It does happen. People make mistakes, and you want to make sure you can take advantage when they are.
So it's approaching the end of the game, so we need to talk about end-game timing. So there are 5 tiles in the bag. So what Peter ideally wants to do here, unless he's got a super high scoring move like a bingo, which he doesn't have, ideally he wants to play ideally 4 tiles, leaving 1 in the bag, or 3 tiles, leaving 2 in the bag.
Well, he does have a bonus lined up. He has Hierarch through the sea.
All right, okay.
But he'll want to see, will that let David bingo out? Is there a reason to not play it? But yeah, otherwise, in this case, you want to leave 1 in the bag. There's no reason not to.
So that is all right. Okay, yeah. So this is a situation in which a lot of Nigel would often turn down a bingo. He would defer the bingo and attempt to bingo out.
And then David Eldar wondering if he can star in his own series. Tired of being the guest star on this one.
So Peter's emptied the bag, which means that David's in a position to come up with the best endgame. He's got perfect knowledge of Peter's rack. And David Eldar is one of the best endgame players in the world. He's probably second best behind Nigel Richards. He takes real pride in playing accurate endgames. And one thing he does, which I've noticed that he does, is he writes out the calculations. He writes out the net score for a particular sequence and compares that for similar choices in the endgame, and he tries to play the word with the highest net score, including count back any opponent's play. And he's going to want to do that now. And again, David's got a good temperament. It won't matter to him that, hey, the game is lost. He'll want to take pride in playing an accurate endgame.
Yeah, and it's worth noting here that he's left himself 10 minutes to do those calculations, whereas Peter is sitting on 33 seconds. So the pace of David's play throughout the game, really comes back to help him figuring out this optimal end game. And even though this game is lost in a lot of circumstances, that's the difference between winning and losing: having the time to do the calculations and figure out what the optimal end game is.
So you might want to know, well, how do I get good at playing endgames? Well, one way to get good at playing endgames is to practice playing a perfect endgame when you are in this exact situation, when the game is not on the line, when the pressure's off. If you can't do it now, you're not going to be able to do it when the scores are even.
Yeah, it's very easy to just kind of throw your hands up and say, well, I'm just not good at endgames. But the fact of the matter is,
You've got to practice.
you have one every single game.
Exactly.
Every game has an endgame.
Exactly.
It might not matter in a particular instance, but it's there to be practiced.
Practice makes perfect. So the optimum line for David is FOP, above hierarch, onto that northern triple word score. So one of the principles in endgame timing is one of the basic heuristics is nearly every endgame the optimum line is going to be an out in 2. There are some special situations where that's not the case, but it's nearly always going to be an out in 2. So what you want is, you want ideally 2 high scoring plays, you want the second 2 options for the second play, 2 different parts of the board, and you want to minimize your opponent's reply. So by playing there, David scored a ton of points. He scored 43 points. He's topped Peter Armstrong playing DAY in the same spot, and he's left himself 2 outs.
Yep. And I believe Peter has no way to block Finn's in the upper corner. Aside from just dropping the A on top of the blank H.
Which would result in a lower net score for Peter over the sequence.
Because then he has Finn's alongside denotes, making F-E-I-N-N-O and S-T. So
David also had Finn's to the left of denotes as well. So he guaranteed himself 2 reasonably well scoring outs. So that's a really nice example of good end gameplay in a situation where the game is lost. Really well done, guys. So that's a perfect optimal end game by David Eldar.
Yep.
And actually Peter's choice was optimal as well.
Yep, so there we have it, and we end on 5-8-3 for Peter, right? And 4-1-4 for David.
Coming up just shy of a 1,000-point game.
I think it was a good game, good high quality Scrabble from both players, lots of learning points really. I think Peter's going to be in a great frame of mind. The rest of the match is going to be really interesting. It's going to be super interesting.
Yep. Yeah, if you put up 4-14 and you didn't draw any of the blanks, and it's David can't be too upset about the way he played. It was obviously just that one monster bonus that put the game away, but he's playing good Scrabble, so it should be.
I wonder what Peter's best stylistic strategy should be for the remaining games. I wonder whether he's better off on an open board against David Eldar in a shootout scenario compared to getting into like tactical battles on a closed board. I would suggest, all other things being equal, that the first option gives him a better chance at winning, in my opinion. I think David Eldar is more likely to outplay him on a closed tactical board than the opposite.
Yeah, I think David Eldar would outplay most people on a more tactical position.
And as a general principle, if you're playing a better player, if you're playing a better player who's higher rated than you, you probably want the board, I would say, wide open. And in that situation, if you outdraw your opponent, and if you have reasonable word knowledge, you're probably going to win. Assuming your word knowledge is good enough to exploit the opportunities that arise.
Yeah.
With your good tiles.
And that's kind of the opposite of what a lot of lower-rated players would think. They think that they want to keep the board closed because their opponent knows more words, and they want to, restrict their ability to, capitalize on those words. But no, it's the other way around. You have to make sure that if you get lucky, and you pull the good tiles, that you have the opportunity on the board to take advantage of that luck.
So David Eldar, I think he looks a bit grumpy at the end of this game, but to be fair to him, he looked quite grumpy after he won the first game. So I'm having real trouble reading him, to be honest.
He's just a grump.
So I assume we're going to be alternating back and forth between the two series.
I believe so. So we should be able to catch Nigel and Paul in Game 3 next.
So Peter got 2 enormous bonuses in that game, didn't he? Got a double-double and a 9-timer.
Yeah. That always helps, having 200-point bonuses.
Yeah, usually you're going to win in that situation. So why do we call them 9-timers but not 4-timers?
It depends on what part of the world you come from. I think some people do call them 4-timers.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's 9-timer British, Brett? Is that right? 9-timer? It's British, yeah. As opposed to triple or a double.
Yeah, that sounds like you're ordering coffee at Tim Hortons. Or the much rarer 6-timer.
Yeah, extremely rare those.
It'll be interesting to see how David Eldar plays the next game. My best guess is he's not going to change the way he plays at all. He's just going to play his game. But it'll be interesting to see if he's a tiny bit more defensive in the next game, which is what most people would do when they've been beaten handily in the preceding game. And I think that's the reason why people have streaks of wins and streaks of losses. When you lose a game, you play slightly worse in the next game than had you won the game.
Yeah, it looked like his instinct on that first move was to play a defensive move like Tav, T-A-V, instead of Mauve, which he was a little bit more aggressive than we were expecting him to be, and he got burned on it pretty hard.
Absolutely.
Whereas the triple, I mean, bonding was a perfectly reasonable play. It was not something that was unexpected. There was no reason that he would not do something like that, and he got burned on that pretty hard as well. So I don't know if you can necessarily draw any conclusions from those.
I mean, it's interesting, the difference between Tav and Mauve in this case, and I think quite often the case, is not between your opponent having a bingo or not having a bingo. It's between the difference between a higher scoring bingo and a slightly lower scoring bingo. And the difference might be 20 points, it might be 15 points, and you might be scoring 15 points more for your more open move. So probably, and if you look at simulation results in this kind of situation, it washes out. It's really hard to see. Generally speaking, in static simulations, defensive choices do badly. You can argue that the simulation is inaccurate because it uses a speed player algorithm for each iteration, but defensive, positional choices do badly in simulations.
that we see here. People playing in the final fling. Have the 7-game tournament running concurrently with the quarterfinals and semifinals. Tomorrow, all eyes will be on the finalists.
So what you're seeing here is a group of people who played 35 games of Scrabble over 4 days, and that wasn't quite enough. So they decided to play another 8 on a Saturday. So this is a good example of what we call an addiction.
Mm-hmm. And we see actually David Koenig and Dave Wiegand playing what I would assume is a friendly game there on the corner. Not even part of the tournament. Should we zoom in and try to get some bonus coverage of that? Who knows? They might have 50 pounds riding on it. So
Yeah.
I have to say, as someone who's played in this tournament, it was an excellent tournament.
mm-hmm.
It was well run. The room was incredibly spacious, as you can see in this shot. Things ran to time. The venue was exemplary, and the quality of the coverage, the technical quality of the coverage has been really, really good. I think this tournament is a huge benefit to Scrabble in the UK. Long may it continue.
Certainly. Looking forward to having it next year. And yeah, Amy as the TD is one of the best in the world, I would say.
Agreed.
And yeah, on the first day there was a bit of a delay figuring out who was arriving and who wasn't, but after that everything ran to timetable right on. It's really impressive how she can get a large group of people to start on the minute exactly when they need to start.
If anybody needs anyone to herd a herd of cats, I think she might be your person.
Yeah. Yes, I've heard of cats.
Oh, you've had? Okay.
I think it's a pretty close run thing between cats and Scrabble players, actually, in terms of how unmanageable they are.
Yeah.
Individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
We've had an incredible diversity in age. I think some of our youngest competitors also competed in the World Youth Championship. Imad made the quarterfinals. He's 13, turning 14 next month. Bob Lynn comes to mind. He's 78, still traveling the world playing high-level tournament Scrabble.
Yeah. And he came very close to making the bracket as well.
This is a game that brings together people from multiple different countries, cultures, age groups, based on a shared passion, a shared obsession, a shared addiction. It's a beautiful game. So it looks like the next game is starting very shortly. So Nigel and Paul Gallen, they are tied 1-1 in a best of 5, first to 3 wins. Paul did extremely well to overcome a 100-point deficit in the second game after being bagged in the first game, after losing, playing very good Scrabble but still losing in the first game by a handy margin. I think Nigel, the way he plays Scrabble, his demeanor, it does not vary depending on what's happened in the past. I think Paul, he's got one of the best temperaments in the game. You can't tell by looking at him how things are going. He plays to a consistently high standard no matter how he's doing in the game or the tournament. I think his temperament is one of his greatest strengths, and also he's one of the best with respect to word finding, word knowledge, anagramming, all that. I can't think of any weaknesses in Paul's game, really. He's one of the best players in the world. And I'm really looking forward to watching this.
Yeah, it'll be a really good match, and sometimes Paul doesn't get mentioned in these conversations as much as he should about, the best players in the world, just because he doesn't travel that much and he doesn't play outside of Ireland and the UK very often. So it's really great to see him and see his game showcased in this way against Nigel on the biggest stage that we have.
So Paul used to be a lawyer. He used to work in his dad's conveyancing firm, and then he retrained as an accountant and joined one of the big accountancy firms. So we were thinking earlier about coming up with kind of nicknames for the different Scrabble players, and we thought, the accountant, based on the movie, would be a good nickname. Silent,
Yeah.
strong, highly dangerous.
Yeah, the accountant with the superpower of, arithmetic. Can leap tall columns of numbers in a single bound.
Paul's probably one of the best players never to have won the world championship. I think this tournament means a lot to him. He doesn't often show it, but I think it does. But you got to keep that all in check and put that at the back of your mind and concentrate on process and concentrate on the 12 or 13 puzzles you need to solve to win this game.
Yep.
Well, for this game, I think my money is on the guy with the beard and glasses. I say that without fear of contradiction.
Or controversy. So Paul's giving the tiles a rumble, which implies that Nigel's starting. That's the custom in this crazy game of ours.
Yep. You want to mix them up before they start, just so that it's a little more random.
It's an integral part of the pre-game ritual.
Mm-hmm.
That and shaking hands. Oh, no handshake. No handshake.
They're playing footsie underneath. Paul is currently grinding his right foot into Nigel's left knee, as appropriate for Freemason games such as this.
Although usually shaking the tiles is a formality, but after an exchange, when you've thrown back the cue,
Yep.
before you draw, you want to make sure you mix up the tiles because you're going to draw that back.
Oh, and keep it on top and then
Yeah.
go around it and go underneath.
Yeah. Make sure you draw from different parts of the bag.
So this is going to be quite an interesting decision for Nigel, because the candidate choices, they are really very different from each other. So the options are changing. Playing short or playing long. Looks like Nigel's thinking of playing long, really, and it's going to completely change how the game goes here on forth, depending on what he decides to do. Nigel generally prefers playing short. Generally, he does not like playing 5 or 6 letter words unless he has to. So he's changed.
Any change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's changed.
I
Yeah.
would exchange with that rack.
Yeah. And according to the Quackle Sim, that is the best leave from that rack. Some people might want to keep 2 vowels, 2 consonants, Tain or Tine, but Nigel's anticipating getting some consonants to play through on the next go. So Paul's got a choice of playable 7s here. He's going to spend some time, because the blank's going to slow him down finding the best move here.
The problem is Nano B, he can't slot the B, even though he doesn't give any extra letters to play through.
Yeah, if he plays Nano B, duplicating the E with the blank, if he wants to do that and slot the B, then it ends up starting on the star and being right next to the triple. And with
Yeah.
Nigel just having exchange 2,
Yeah.
you don't. He doesn't necessarily have an S, but you think it's more likely than random that he has an S, given that he's exchanged 2. So you probably can't have to rule out Nano B, because it's not worth giving up the points to play
Absolutely.
something else.
Mm-hmm.
It would be really easy to spend a lot of time deciding on this move, and that would be a mistake, because in actual fact they're not very different from each other in terms of equity.
Right.
So Paul's done the right thing.
And he's played it vertically as well in your face, Nigel.
So let's see how Nigel feels having to respond to a vertical opening.
See if it really puts him off.
It's vertically too. I'll bet you know what it is.
So Nigel's drawn 2 clunky consonants to go with his leave, which means he's not got a bingo. So is going to is still going to want to score decently well and still keep a bingo heavy keep basically. Um, so it looks like he's looking at Pack to the left of Baron and is playing. Nigel played. I thought Nigel played even quicker than average. What is average for him in the last game? He was just about to play Pack now, but he's reconsidering. The best leave from this rack is probably either AEINT or losing one of those, the A or the I to that. The Pack is winning the sim at the moment. Pack from 7E down is winning the sim, scores really well, scores 30, keeps a really nice leave, and is quite defensive. That the hotspot, the triple letter hotspot to the left of Pack, if it were to be played, it's quite restrictive. KO, you can't put any tiles to the left of KO, and you can only put an S or a O to the left of PA. So it's actually quite a tough spot to exploit. So it's decent defensively. So there's a lot of very, very similar choices, and they're simulating very, very close to each other. There's nothing to choose in this position, really.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard. There's statistically no significant difference.
Also, his patenized through the INs if he's an I instead of an N.
Oh, black horror.
Paul with a sort of a mess of vowels on his rack and is certainly glad that Nigel left the B unobstructed, as it lets him flush out the rack pretty effectively with Sabul.
Paul's gone for the best choice according to the Quackle sim. His choice wins the sim handily.
Yeah, it's not like there's any leaves, particular long or mid-range leaves that are any good out of that rack. So just play as many as you can, and make your bad leaves as short as possible.
Current scores: Nigel Richards 94, Paul.
No,
So it's other way around. Pardon. Paul Gallen 94, Nigel Richards 24.
So the exchange that Nigel had on his opening rack with a solid leave, and then he drew some junk to go with it and had to play off the eye that he'd kept on the initial exchange, and then he drew kind of more junk to go with it, and that's always the sort of worst case scenario out of an opening rack exchange, is that you never really get a bingo down till several turns later because you keep drawing non-bingo prone stuff and moving on. But yeah. Nigel's drawing hand seems to have done it this time.
This indent would be a funny felony.
So it's interesting. Nigel kept the two vowels which were compatible with the word he played. So he kept E and A, so lining himself up for a potential four-timer starting with LEA, and that's exactly what's happened.
So I don't have a 9 to IMG now.
Four-timer
DT name. Yeah.
Yeah, from the L.
from the L of Sibul. Keeping vowels and, well, mostly vowels compatible with the board, compatible with the hooks on the board, is especially important this early in the game.
Yeah, the sort of static evaluation of tile leaves that we all do is is useful, but you have to remember that E and the A are good letters, but also if you set up a space that you know where you want to play that E and the A, that's going to be more. It's going to be much better than E and the I that don't fit in that space. Except IE would fit in the space. But
And that's especially an issue at the start of the game on a closed board, and at the end of the game on a closed board.
yeah, the thing about the first couple turns is that the play you make gives the only openings on the board.
So Quackle is recommending what we call a bridge. It's recommending a vertical play between Baron and Puts, ing, making RIZKONNING, and that would be a beautiful play. And actually, us human beings, we are not hardwired to spot bridges, so a lot of Scrabble players are more likely to miss a bridge than to a more conventional play through existing letters or an underlap or overlap.
It doesn't block leavings.
Yeah, it's worth noting that even though that does use the Z in its formation of that bridge, it does not block what Nigel has planned.
So that move ing, it would require good board vision, and it'll be interesting to see if Paul spots it. It's especially hard because of the blank, the R being a blank. That messes with the minds of most people as well. It's harder to visualize words because of the blank tile.
certainly.
And you're far more likely to play 4 only 2-letter words and 3-letter words with a blank than otherwise. Or miss a bingo through a blank as a floater.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
You have to be especially careful not to do that. So it's interesting, Paul and Nigel, they have different what I call turn routines. So Paul keeps his letters in alphabetical order until he decides what he wants to play. Nigel, and I think he's fairly unique, well maybe not unique, but nearly unique, he lines up the word he's going to play immediately, which is usually the best word.
Yeah.
I don't know if Paul has considered it at all, but it's worth noting that indebting is not a word, even though indebted is.
Well done, Paul. So that's the best choice. And Nigel, even if there's a move which is clearly the best move, he generally tends to take 20 to 30 seconds to play it. And there's been speculation in the past as to whether he doesn't want to give his opponent any additional information based on the length of so he's playing this. He's decided to play quickly this time, and I wonder whether he's to an extent whether he's fast playing Paul, because Paul is a slower player than average, I would say. I wonder whether he's fast playing Paul.
So this bonus puts Nigel at 161 and Paul at 122. So Paul will be slightly behind, 39 points, but it's still quite the active game, and even with both blanks on the board, all the S's are still to come. Like there's still.
So Paul's
lot
got
going
a beautiful move onto that inviting ing on the middle of the board. Extend to the triple word score. I'll give the listener some time to try and come up with it.
Yeah, the existence of ing as a word is probably the most common way for 10-letter bingos to get played. But in this case, a 9-letter non-bingo is also made possible.
The biggest impediment to spotting this word is not looking for it in the first place. Once you start looking, it becomes a lot easier. It would be a board vision issue if it were to be missed. Nigel does spend a fair amount of time watching other games. He's a fast player, as I said. He usually finishes his game before other players do. And he does tend to look at other players, look at their games. I mean, there's been speculation as to whether he's trying to judge their facial expressions based on what tiles they have on their rack at a particular time. When I talked to him about this, he said that he's tried to do that, but it's too unreliable, so he stopped doing it. he said that some mind might be frowning because they didn't like what they have for breakfast, as opposed to because they have clunk on their rack. So he said it's not a valuable thing to do, trying to read your opponent.
He wants you to think.
Yeah, just in general, you find it can be like somebody is upset because they draw the second blank and they wanted them separately, or they're upset because they drew the cue but haven't seen their 60-point cue play yet, and it's just very, very difficult to try and get a read. Once in a while in a specific situation you can, like if there's it's late in the game and there's a cue unseen, and somebody looks at their tiles and gives a maybe
They're bluffing.
if they're thinking deeply enough to bluff that, it's hard to say.
So all of Paul's remaining choices. So the word we were talking about is debelling onto ing. I think Paul's overlooked it because because he didn't look at that spot on the board. But his choice is equivalent to a lot of similar choices in the same place. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So Quackle prefers playing down from ing, playing bled down from ing. So Paul has made a more open move, and I wonder why he's done that. What are your thoughts?
Well, he is behind by a little bit, so he wants to make sure the board doesn't get too...
and he's going to be punished for that.
Yeah, he's going to be punished swiftly and severely.
The building was better, but Nigel would have hit like
So-
anyway.
So it's interesting why he chose bled, opening a triple word score top right corner, as opposed to a same word, different place, more closed, given that he's probably going to be nearly even by the end of that exchange. It's an interesting decision, and it's pretty uncharacteristic of Paul. He tends to play a control game.
Score currently is Nigel 253 and Paul 140.
It's always tempting to play what if in Scrabble. So what if Paul played bled and bing? Would Nigel's bingo have been homeless?
Think so.
So that's Scrabble is an incredibly volatile game. Having a rack which is one tile different from a similar rack, it can mean the difference of 100 points. And this is a really good example of that. The change in the score, the volatility from choosing bled to the top right corner compared to choosing bled to on the middle of the board, it's enormous, basically. Nigel would have been left bingoless had the more defensive choice been chosen.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fine to make openings if there are advantages in terms of leave or score, but if all other things been equal, it's probably best to play the more defensive choice if the scores are even, unless it's a special situation.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how these choices that seem marginal, like it wasn't a huge error, even positionally, like it's not great, but it ends up veering the course of a game in a completely different direction.
So the scores are 253 to Paul, I beg your pardon, 253 to Nigel, 140 to Paul. He's 113 points behind. He's going to need the equivalent of 2 bingos to catch up, essentially. The board it's got a couple of hotspots on it. It's got a number of bingo lines. The game is certainly not lost, and the volatility in Scrabble can be an advantage if you're 113 points behind. A lot of CSW games are won from 113 points behind.
Certainly.
So Paul's choice is absolutely fine. It wins about 5% of games after 2 turns, according to Crackle. That's a very reasonable choice. There's a lot of very similar short words in the same place which evaluate similarly.
Yeah, Paul makes an opening that puts a strong bonus lane that would score a lot. Nigel shuts it down immediately, but
So
it's OE was a good opening, and it created a threat that Nigel then had to address.
Yeah, Nigel
Oh,
had already
that's
been
Yeah.
had already had awful lined up on his rack. You think he was probably thinking about playing it down, hooking the A in front of the end of dihedron, and he just was given a even better spot to put it.
Nigel also lined up fought earlier. which would have gone. Nigel also lined up fought earlier, which would have gone along EDRO and dihedron if Paul hadn't played there.
this is
When you talk, people on the stream can only hear mumbling. So it's not good.
so Paul's down to 12 minutes on his clock. Nigel's got 90 minutes. He's drawn into a bingo, keeping a bingo friendly leave. So the game's got interesting all of a sudden.
So yeah, Paul's up to 225 now, to 286 for Nigel.
He's trailing by 61, well within range.
Definitely. And there are still no S's on the board, or on Nigel's rack.
It's really helpful to think when you're 150 behind, well, what would the score look like if I play a bingo right now? And that looks a lot more manageable than looking at existing scores, and that's exactly what's happened here.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost the Lion King in the middle of the board there.
Okay, so Nigel scores well with Jack's top right corner, keeping GUROT. That wins the Quackle sim handily.
Another option just to get rid of both of those heavy tiles would be to just play Je through that EJEUX. Although we know Nigel likes to milk his power tiles for points as much as possible, and giving them both up for a fairly cheap score of 26 would not necessarily fit what he likes to do.
Nigel's style of play is to string a succession of high-scoring moves together, all the while guaranteeing or trying to guarantee himself another high score for the next turn.
Mm-hmm.
And any kind of bingo, unless he's very close to a bingo, any bingos he gets, he kind of lucks into, so to speak. His priority is to score consistently and to try to have scoring insurance for the next turn.
Yeah.
And to outscore his opponent on hotspots on a closed board.
Yeah, one thing that's to Paul's advantage here is that unlike the games we saw before, where it was really spidery and there was lots of real estate that was boxed in and made useless, right now all of the tiles are kind of pretty close together, and there's large portions of the board that remain undeveloped. So there's going to be space to grow and set up lanes on the left, especially on the left side of the board, and maybe in the top two rows for bonuses later. So it's still very, very much alive, and Paul will have very much his opportunities to open up places to play bonuses, unlike some of the other games we've seen where there just wasn't the real estate to develop.
So Quackle quite likes AYE to the left of ALET, making YA and EIKON. And I think that's a really hard spot, because thinking to put a vowel in front of icon, that word structure is very unusual. It's very unusual to prefix a four-letter word starting with a vowel with another vowel. So it'll be a hard spot for Paul. It'll be interesting whether he passes this test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and putting AYE in that spot is going to invite a play down on column D, opening up some horizontal bingo lanes in the across the top couple rows, and perhaps also if there's a consonant A, right, played 2 or 3 turns in the future, then hopefully it'll have a front hook that'll go down in the third column.
So Nigel's nearly 100 points ahead. Paul's down to 9 minutes on his clock. He's having to make some really tough decisions now. Nigel's got 18 minutes. So thinking ahead, there are 4 S's out. Neither player has an S. So there's potential for bingos hooking A-lets, although the S is in a difficult position for a 7-letter bingo. And we are running out of scoring spots also on this board. This board is a box. Everything's very congested. Everything's very central. But on the positive side, there's lots of unoccupied real estate.
Yeah, and
So
Nigel.
that's extremely well done by Paul. In my opinion, that's a that demonstrates very good board vision.
Mhm.
Well done, Paul. Good composure.
Yep, that puts him on 251 to Nigel's 317.
So again, he is caught up to within a bingo of Nigel, but Nigel's on turn. In my opinion, in this kind of situation, the best defense is been further ahead. So a lot of players will be tempted to sacrifice points to try and close this board down even further. But if you can remain more than a bingo ahead on tempo, that's probably the best defense in this situation. And if you get a bingo, game over in that situation because
Right.
you've been scoring.
Yeah, so what can Nigel do here that continues to keep the scoring pressure on? He's up by 60 something. If he scores 25 to 30, he's still a bit more than a bingo ahead.
It looks like he's considering Jur onto the E of Alet, keeping nice balance RIOT, and in his mind he's comparing that to Jur, GIRRE, in the same position. And as we said before, this is something that now you can see you can see the cogwheels turning in Nigel's head.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to be looking at the pool. So if he keeps OUT, there's only one U out, 4 S's and 3 E's. So any thoughts, guys, on the relative merits of Jur versus Jur?
Well, we're getting to the point in the game. There's few enough tiles in the bag, and all of the S's are unseen. That turning over one more
Yep.
has that added benefit of one more shot at,
So
at
in
an S.
terms of the simulation, there's absolutely nothing to choose between the two, nothing at all, which is interesting. Most people would think that I would prefer Jur actually, better leave, but there must be some advantages, positional advantages to Jur that I can't quite appreciate at the moment.
Yeah, well, putting the J next to the colored square
Yeah, sure.
is also
Increase-
a negative. You're giving up a
Yeah.
25, 30 point play
Yeah,
for
fair enough.
2 tiles.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Nigel must have thought that OUT was a reasonable keep given what was in the bag, and that seems to have worked out well for him.
Yep. Yep, he has his bonus lined up. Let's see what Paul can come up with.
So this is an illustration of the point we made earlier. If you keep scoring when you're ahead, if you happen onto a bonus, you can put the game away. You're one bonus away from putting the game away.
Yep.
Whereas if you play defensively and sacrifice, leave and score, you're less likely to bonus, and your opponent often catches you up without a bonus. So the lesson is try to play attacking Scrabble when you're ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Positive Scrabble when you're ahead.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's when you start to play negatively that you get in trouble and you let your opponent outscore you each turn, and the sum of those turns.
And I think
Makes this
psychologically, you feel if you start playing defensive that you need to keep doubling down, as in you had to keep making more defensive controlling choices on subsequent turns. So you're fully committed, and then you're in a situation where you're less than a bonus ahead. If your opponent bonuses, they're going to be ahead of you, so you're fully committed to your choices at that point. So according to Quackle, Paul's best choice is simply dropping OM under Jur, but he's decided to go elsewhere. There are 4 S's out. He's created a massive bingo file with the S hook. He's trying to increase volatility.
He's got to draw an S. Like, how can you miss them in the bag?
Mm-hmm.
So he's probably thinking that if Nigel's got a bingo right now, I'm dead anyway, so I got to assume the best. I got to assume he's not got a S. I'm going to draw an S onto that spot, and it's actually really difficult to block because of the C. You can't parallel it because of the C. So it's an inventive opening.
Also, K is gone.
Yep. So yeah, you're thinking you're with the sort of normal worst case scenario is that Nigel has a small S play for like 30 points that takes that out, and then you've kind of traded plays and he got a shot at the bag.
Oh no, so I mistracked. Why won't? Right, yeah, of course.
So Nigel puts his bonus down, and that's 68 points to
So,
bring him up to 409.
No.
Hostage.
so Nigel would have briefly considered not playing the bonus. In his mind, he would have gone through the probability of Paul hitting a 9 timer through that S, and he would have been thinking about, am I more likely to win with my bonus, or is it more likely that if I try to control the game from here without bonusing, that I have a high, and he's decided that it's more likely to win playing adventurously. And I mean, even if Paul plays worst case scenario, gets a 9 timer, Nigel might still have a chance of winning, given how far ahead he is. So from Nigel's point of view, he probably wins all games without a 9, or nearly all games without a 9 timer, and some games with a 9 timer. So
Yeah,
Paul's got a homeless 7.
Yeah, he could. One suggestion here is that he plays hostage, and then hope that Nigel hasn't drawn any of the other S's. Which
Oh.
maybe the situation is that dire that you need to start taking hostages. But
Sorry.
opening up another 9 timer. Yeah, let's play some Scrabble.
Sorry.
So Paul is up at 304 to Nigel's 409. And then Nigel gets to look at the pool and try to figure out which one to address. Poor Paul, he just can't seem to draw when he needs to. Always just a step short.
What's going to improve his drawing technique?
But so we have an update from the other game. It sounds like we don't have an update from the other game. I'm getting conflicting information about what the score is.
Okay. Yeah.
So Nigel's got a couple good scoring options to obstruct that G. He had originally lined up Gasify, but he's picking Pias instead, which has the additional advantage of obstructing bingos coming down that second column, hooking the T. And it has the additional advantage of scoring an extra point.
So what does Paul do now? Is just play is QAT a reasonable
Just Korma off the A.
option? Korma into Umiak.
It's interesting. I think it's probably quite difficult to play 8 with a S in the second. It'll be interesting to find how many 8s there are with a S in the third position. S's are usually at the beginning of words and end of words, and it can be tricky trying to wrap an 8 around the S in the middle of the word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And Nigel's obviously decided that the risk is higher with the G given the unseen tiles.
Paul pulls an I, he might hit a miss word. But that's That's going to be your main threat.
So speaking to Nigel about situations like this, his thought process here is, well, what's the worst case scenario? What needs to happen for me to lose this game? And he's thinking, well, Paul needs to start play a 9-timer between the bottom 2 triple word scores. So his priority is going to be, playing anything at all which stops that happening. To a less, I mean, the ideal play here would stretch to the middle bottom triple word score, which would obstruct sevens ending in Umiax. That would be the ideal play, but Nigel's not going to be able to achieve that on this turn.
Yeah, there should be a spot for Paul to put his 7 down.
So from
At
Nigel's
least.
point of view, there's 8 unseen tiles, 1 in the bag, and the unseen tiles are Sermon ER. So Paul's done quite well with his endgame timing. Nigel, talking to him, when I asked him about what he does in this kind of situation, he will solve every single endgame. So there are 8 possible endgames in this scenario. He will manually solve all 8 endgames. That's what he'll do. And if there are 2 tiles in the bag, I think there's 72 possible permutations.
Mhm.
He can and will, if necessary, solve 72 endgames.
That's a lot of endgames. Yeah, it looks like there's a bonus on the Umiax with an R from Nigel's position with an R or an N in the bag, and what is actually in the bag is an R. And there are no 9-timers through the S in the pool. So if he's gonna block one, it's the Umiax hook that's the one to block. The S sitting in the middle of the triple lane is actually no threat for a bonus.
If you're not Nigel, and if you're in this situation and you're very short of time and you can't evaluate 8 endgames in your head, one other option you can do is to score and try to outrun, which is a less risky strategy than making a positional play which scores less, which would lose to a bingo. So if you can make a play, any play, which would outrun the highest scoring bingo on this board, you can be reasonably confident that will be a 100% win. So that's one way you can simplify this problem.
Yeah, playing for the win is generally going to be easier than trying to play for every last bit of spread.
So Nigel's going to be Nigel would have worked out in a couple of seconds that there were no playable 9-timers. And then he's going to be trying to work out what the likelihood of a 7 ending ending in S on the Umiax is. And he's going to be trying to decide, well, is it worth blocking that? Or am I just going to score sufficiently that I can outrun the worst case scenario? That's what he's trying to work out right now.
Yep. And
so one option for Nigel is simply playing FAW top left corner, making APO and WYE, which wins against the worst case scenario. That's a simple solution to this pre-end game.
yeah, Paul's currently on 340 and Nigel on 449, so it's a 109-point difference. And Paul's bonus would be 90 points. But Nigel susses out what the threat is. Plays waifs. And does he have a second outplay?
So does Paul have a playable 9-letter word onto the S of waves?
From the
Yeah.
other game, we have 351 to 330 with
So is
Peter with the
this,
lead over David Eldar.
Is this a rare example of a miscalculation by Nigel? This has Nigel miscalculated? Did he think that he was blocking all possible bingos with waves? Because if he wasn't, then 4 is the better play. Is it possible he's overlooked the possible 9? Or as he said, even if that's the case, I still win.
There's probably a limit to
But-
how many things he can block.
So FAW is a simple guaranteed win based on outrunning the best bingo. Whereas this is what technically it's a failed block, isn't it? Essentially.
Yeah, it should still win though.
Well, it makes him find a harder word rather than the very easy word. But yeah.
Yeah, the out bonus would be 76. You pick up 18 from Nigel's rack.
I think Paul's going to get this. So it's a simple 8 plus an S. I think it's pretty unlikely he's going to miss this. I think what we'll find when we'll analyze his position is that there's only a 1 in 8 chance of Paul going after waves, and that even if that were the case, Nigel wins. And if you do the sums, if you do the math on average equity loss, I think waves will be best. That's what we're going to find, knowing Nigel.
The question is, was there another bingo he blocked from the URS or Torches with a different rack? Maybe this one wasn't blockable anyway, but he did block something else.
So I think it's straightforward. It's straightforward that waves is 100% win. That's not an issue. What's really interesting is what is the best play in terms of spread, basically on average. On average, using inference. And I suspect if you look at this, you will find that waves is best. If I had to put money on it, that's what I would guess.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. He could have had Sermoner, and Waves does block that.
So Nigel wins game 3. Final scores were 4-6-9 to Nigel.
Yep.
4-3-4 to Paul. Nigel's 2-1 up. If Nigel wins the next game, he goes through to the final. Paul needs to beat Nigel twice in succession to make it to I believe, his first World Championship final.
Yep. So yeah, it'd be some exciting Scrabble to come for sure. And yeah, the last update we had from the other match, Peter was ahead 3-5-1 to 3-3-0, but that, as far as we know, is still underway. It may be finishing up shortly. And we will have David Eldar and Peter Armstrong on the stream for the next round.
Fun.
So I'll be handing over to Brett Smitheram, one-time Scrabble World Champion. Take care for the moment, folks.
Thank you, Harshan.
Okay, so this is the fun bit. This is where we commentate on the basis of body language. Pete is in earnest. He's just adjusted his clothing, which I think is a positive sign. He's looking intently engaged rather than crushed.
Well, that was a post-it note and not a banana.
Uh,
Yeah, I wonder what happened to those bananas.
Pete's eyebrows are very expressive.
as is Eldar's banana. Oh, there it is.
There
There
we
it
go.
is. Yeah.
I gave Eldar that banana.
Ah.
That's what we heard.
You gave him a banana with black spots on it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just clarifying.
I actually gave a banana to each one of the semifinalists.
It's a lot of bananas.
This sounds like a joke, but it's totally literal. We had some leftover bananas at our Airbnb, so we decided to gift them to the semifinalists to give them a little extra energy for the afternoon games.
It's important to distribute your bananas.
David Eldar, judging by his stance, I think he's got either lubrical or rubrical. I mean, that's the seat. That's the kind of pose he usually has when he's got that on his rack.
It's a B.
Yeah, so he's got rubrical or lubrical. There you go. I can read him perfectly. Why did I lose to him twice?
Because you couldn't stand behind him and see his racks?
Being able to recognize the shapes of the letters is an important skill in Scrabble.
It beats any bingo and blocks most bingos, basically. So 24% bingo percentage off the base. And outruns them all.
Do we have any idea how much time is left on the clocks here?
No, because the clock's behind Eldar from this angle. Can we read that into... hold on, let's have a look. The way that Peter's fingers are moving. I reckon he's got less than 5 minutes.
You can't really see the reflection in Peter's ring.
No, nor Eldar's banana.
Enough about Eldar's banana.
That's quite near to Peter's ring.
Eldar's putting the pen down. He's written something on some paper. He's no longer writing on the paper.
Pete is looking intently to the side, perhaps at his own score sheet.
He is gently stroking his beard like some sort of supervillain.
It's when he starts gently stroking his opponent's beard that you know you've got a problem.
Yeah.
That's why Eldar doesn't have a beard. He's one step ahead of him.
He just wants Eldar's banana.
This is what Scrabble commentary turns into when we can't see the board in words.
We know there's tiles on the board. That's an important start.
Has anybody noticed? I mean, there has been a rumour that Eldar has actually hired a hitman to kill Peter in the event that Peter goes 2-1 up, and I can't see any confirmation of this. But
Why would Eldar use that hitman on Peter rather than Nigel?
well, that's a good question. But no, apparently there's a guy who's just been staring at Peter's back, just ready to plunge a knife into it. But I haven't seen any evidence of it. That's just rumour, really.
Pure conjecture.
Eldar is working that pen feverishly.
Yeah, he's probably just writing out a check.
Does Peter have fewer than 7 tiles on his rack?
He has 5.
That's 5, and Eldar played that rather quickly. Oh, feverish writing. Intense.
Everyone is writing.
Intense.
Looks like Peter has 27 seconds on his clock.
And he's still taking the time to work out stuff on the score sheet.
Which maybe means that he's won.
Perhaps he'll take the time to eat a banana. That would really be showboating.
There we go. Yeah, quick. Don't fumble.
Eldar rushes with a move.
He's fumbled his tiles. Oh, man. Oh.
And it looks like he stopped the clock.
8 seconds. He had 8 seconds to go.
2, by the look of it. I think it's 2. He had 13.
Whichever way you look at it, Eldar got his move in just in time. The question is, was it enough? With how intently they were both handling the end game, you feel like it was probably very close.
Wow, I'm getting nervous just watching it. I could use a banana.
Oh, the challenge has been made. A challenge has been made.
Oh. Oh my.
I did notice when I was sitting in the tournament room before in one of the earlier games that it did seem like Peter and David were visiting the challenge computer fairly frequently. Usually you expect in these semifinal matches, the word knowledge is so good, there's not a whole lot of challenges in a game.
Oh no.
Is it coming off?
Peter has put his tiles back on his rack.
Oh no, he's put them on there.
Oh, there are people in the
Yeah,
way.
he's put them on the table. Game over.
Everyone is doing paperwork. The most exciting, gripping part of Scrabble is filling out the paperwork at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the charms is that there is a great deal of bump.
That's why we play Scrabble, for the bureaucracy.
We enjoy filling out forms and signing them. And if you haven't played Tournament Scrabble, you know at the end of every game we have to fill out the scores and the player numbers and the round that the game happened, and then calculate the difference between the scores. There's about 8 to 10 fields to fill in, and then we all have to sign at the bottom to officially verify, and it becomes an official document. And it's a special moment when mere paperwork becomes a document.
Mm-hmm. One thing I've noticed is that when I've played games against Nigel, he tends to fill out the paperwork simply listing his name as the mononymic Nigel with no last name. He is like Madonna or Cher. He needs no further descriptor than simply Nigel.
You think when he started his first, he was Nigel
Peter,
Richards.
sorry, Peter has won 4-3-4 to 4-3-1.
Oh, wow.
Well,
So-
so that puts Peter 2-1 up in this pairing. But that means, yeah, he must have had a comfortable, a lead of at least 12 points or so if he was going to be able to challenge that freely as he did.
So
They may be recounting.
Yeah, there must
we're
be.
coming up to the 4th game out of the best of 5 sets. Does this mean we're going to see Peter and David in the next match on the
Yep.
annotated board?
Yes.
We should do, yeah.
Yep, and Peter will have his chance to punch a ticket to the finals.
Meanwhile, Paul and Nigel will be playing their 4th game of the match, with Nigel up 2-1. And though we won't have live coverage of that, we will try to include updates as it happens and we get more information.
We'll get all the plays and the bonuses and the scores and the positions of all of the bananas.
It looks like they're recounting the score right now, possibly. So we are scheduled to start the next game at 5 o'clock UK time, which is about 5 minutes from now. But considering that it looks like it will be these two players, they will probably be given a short break, and we may be a little bit after 5 o'clock when we actually get started.
Right after he hit his clock, David said he missed the winning play.
Did you say David missed the winning play?
David said right after he hit his clock and the game was over, he realized very quickly he missed the winning play.
We have it on good authority that right after he hit his clock and the game was over, David said, I missed a winning play.
Yeah, those situations are always gutting. And he had one of those against you.
Yes, David lost a game to me by 1 point, recounted the whole thing afterwards, and found that the entire score was correct. But we went through this same sort of agonizing process. I had the fortune of being on the live stream board, and both being on the winning side and losing side of games that were that painstakingly close. I won the one against David by 1, but I lost to Syed by 3 points, I believe it was. We see the table for the live stream where Peter and David are not yet, but will be heading soon after they finish their recount and take a short break.
It's the Coliseum of Scrabble, where we will soon see our gladiators take their place to battle in front of an audience of thousands.
One thing I can say of the experience of sitting at that table, there are a number of things about it that are quite different than playing a regular Scrabble game. One is that the table itself is kind of wide, and the board is a bit tall, so there's actually a little bit of trickery in even reaching over to the other side of the board and putting tiles down sometimes. Not to mention not being able to see over the edge of it and see how many tiles your opponent has, having to ask them how many tiles they have. I had one game, I think that 1 point win over David, in which, as I was trying to put some of the tiles down, some of them accidentally fell beyond my grasp to his other side of the board, and he was fortunately kind enough to pick them up and hand them back to me, but I couldn't even easily reach them from that side of the table. The other thing that I found too is a few times when we got up for challenges and sat back down, I leaned on it too heavily and actually banged the table a little bit. It seems like it is, despite the fact that it's big and heavy, it's not that stable. So that could be a little scary, jostling that thing.
But going back to the gladiator simile, or metaphor indeed, are we looking for the Spartacus right now?
Yeah.
I would say so. Well, we'll call him when we see him.
We see our co-commentator Harshan, who has gone back out to the tournament room and is standing near the competitors, talking to them.
Yep, the recount is ongoing, and we allow the players a 5-minute break at least between the conclusion of one match and the start of the next. So my guess is we're looking at least probably about 5 minutes before we actually get started.
So fun facts, Peter lives in Portland, Oregon, and David in London, England. Peter traveled here with Dave Wiegand, who is also from Portland, Oregon. So we have a whole Portland crew competing in Torquay. David is among a group of London Scrabble players who have been promoting tablet Scrabble. They've been having a number of events in which players are playing Scrabble rather than with a physical board and tiles on tablets or phones or other electronic devices like that.
I should just add, for the Americans who are listening, we are playing in Torquay as opposed to Toiki, which is a completely different geographical location, just in case the accents are confusing you there.
So
my British accent is not as good as your American accent.
So apparently this recount was fairly momentous, and David Eldar found a spot where he gave Peter an extra 10 points.
Oh.
So on the recount, the result was reversed.
Oh.
Wow.
And so there's the tournament director, Amy Byrne, waving all the looky-loos away, and is going over this. But as of right now, it appears that David Eldar has pulled out this match by probably about 7 points from the sound of it. But we're still discussing and counting and, doing all the documentary evidence to...
He's attempting to snatch victory from the jaws of arithmetic.
Yeah. So yeah, in tournament Scrabble, the plays are considered to score themselves, so to speak. So they after the game, you're allowed to recount and re-add everything to make sure that everything is scored as it should have been. There's no Muggins rule where if you call the wrong score, that's what you get, or anything like that in Scrabble.
Some people have proposed that we ought to have such a rule. I believe Nigel was actually in favor of that.
Yeah, and so now there's some sort of director call and some question about the rules and the propriety of the recounter or whatever. But we'll
Stay tuned, folks. We'll let you know.
yeah, we'll figure this out when we get more information.
It does beg the question, though, if regardless of whether David gave 10 extra points to Peter, surely Peter realised that he had. I mean, that can't be the whole story.
No. No, did Peter call an extra 10 points? And I've seen cases where, one player made a math error, added extra 10 points, asked for confirmation, and the other person just sort of writes down what your opponent says.
Yeah.
And, these math errors by 10 points, that sort of thing, they happen. You know, it's
There tends to be sort of almost a groupthink thing, is that as you're discussing and saying the scores back and forth, you may sort of trust what the other person says, or they may sort of tempt you into the same wrong way of thinking about the numbers, and then you may both be under that same delusion until you check the numbers later.
Depending on the scoring error, that challenge at the end might have decided, but it's
Well, it sounds like it was 3 points in Peter's favor originally. So if it became 7 points in David's favor, it would still be the case that the challenge for 5 points would not have been a game changer.
All right, let me go. I'm going to pop out and see if I can talk to Amy Byrne and get some more information about the situation.
Meanwhile, we can sort of see sometimes on the side of the camera there, Nigel was still standing around talking to Harshan and some other players. So neither of the two semifinal matches has resumed at this point while the chaos is being sorted out. So you're not missing anything.
I think this is what we're seeing on camera now is just about as readable as Nigel Richards ever gets.
So another fun fact, after David lost that 1 point game to me on the live stream, he later beat me in a later game that was not on the live stream. And in both games, he played the word Ugali, U-G-A-L-I. Now, there's a tendency sometimes for players to see a word, think of the word, and then be biased toward that word and have it show up again in their games, but this was not that case. In both cases, the word that David played of Ugali simmed best. In one case, it was an endgame play with the bag empty, and we have guaranteed full information that it was indeed the best play. So I just found that kind of amusing that he had two different game positions against the same opponent in the same tournament, where Ugali was the best play, and he found them both.
change the scores on the screen because Peter Armstrong actually lost that game.
So we are preparing for the fourth game of the semifinals of the Mattel World Scrabble Championship between Peter Armstrong and David Eldar. We've had a little bit of a delay because there was a scoring discrepancy in the last match. It turns out that Peter and David both accidentally apparently overscored Peter by 10 points on two different plays, but their errors ended up matching each other, and they both believed originally that Peter won the game by 3 points. But then in the recount, they discovered the arithmetic errors, and the score was reversed to a 7-point win for David. There was a bit of a discussion with the director, Amy. Things got sorted out, and they had a little bit of time to cool off and resolve that, and we'll be starting a little bit late here. But in the end, the adjudication was that David did win the game by 7 points and is up 2-1. So this is now an elimination game for Peter. He would need to win this game and the next game to advance to the final match. In the meantime, Paul Gallen and Nigel Richards are playing in the other semifinal match, with Nigel having a 2-game-1 lead. And we will give you updates on that as it happens. And in fact, we're showing it on the camera right now. It looks like they are just about to start. There's Paul drawing his first tiles and Nigel starting his clock. You'll notice that some players like to draw their 7 tiles face down before looking at any of them. And according to WESPA rules, which is different than North American rules where I and some of the other players here play, you are allowed to start your opponent's clock as soon as they draw a single tile out of the bag. As Nigel did, to immediately start putting the time pressure on Paul.
I think it's just to remove any question as to whether your opponent might have seen a tile or not seen a tile. If you've got a hard and fast as soon as the tile is out of the bag, it only costs a couple of seconds, but it avoids all the awkward disputes.
And I see Jason Keller sitting nearby. I wonder, is he writing racks down for posterity here?
He's
No.
doing annotation, and we'll be sending in updates by text message.
I thought he was autographing a picture of himself for Nigel. No? Oh.
He keeps doing that, and Nigel keeps declining them, and the pile of autographed pictures is growing.
At least this one's closed. So into the main event over on the streaming table. Both players trying to keep composure after the fireworks at the end of the last game.
So we went from Peter and David first having a game that was a blowout laugher in which Peter won by a huge amount thanks to his triple-triple, to one that was down to the wire, just a few points between winner and loser.
Yeah, where it took about 10 minutes after the game ended before we figured out who won.
Mm-hmm. We'll see which one will be closer to what this game looks like. Will it be a laugher? Will it be a close game? Will it be something else? Will there be bananas involved?
Yeah. I don't think I remember a knockout round game changing on a recount. This might be the first one in a world championship, knockout round where the recount reversed the result.
Yeah, I've heard of it happening in other tournament games, but never in one of this magnitude in a championship semifinal match before.
Yeah, usually, one person does the addition, they ask the opponent, do you have this for the score? And they're able to resolve any arithmetic errors quickly in that way. And in the weird coincidence, each person made the same arithmetic error on different plays over the course of the game. So when they came to verify the total, it was 10 points off.
Being up on that live stream board is nerve-wracking enough, all the more so when you are in a elimination game, as Peter is right now, but especially given the circumstances of what just transpired in the last round. It'll be interesting to see how well he's able to manage his nerves in this situation.
Yeah, and also interesting to see if David Eldar can, kind of dial it back in and stay focused, because he was pretty, he was down to like 2 seconds left and thought he missed his winning play, and then went through the recount and went through the director call where the TD had to come over and uphold the recount. So
apparently his winning play was to ask for a recount.
Yeah, that's when it's the winning play. That's a good thing to remember.
Okay, so
Peter is going first.
Peter is going first. Needing to win this game to stay in the 2019 Mattel World Scrabble Championships.
And it looks like he's got a fairly balanced rack of 3 consonants and 4 vowels.
It's almost homemade for the game.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that immediately jumps to mind is just the simple homed. Doubling the H and doubling the word is a very good score.
I think Mahoe is slightly better, keeping ED.
Mm-hmm.
David's picked a blank.
It's also Heam, Heame.
keeping OD. Which score? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good general lesson when you've got very versatile tiles like this, that you're going to have many different words. I think there are a lot of players who may just see a word like homed and jump and play it right away, and it's very much a good strategy when you find a good move to look for a better one and keep seeing, are there other ways that I can score around the same amount, maybe even a little less, but still milk a little more out of this rack and leave a slightly better leave. And as I say this, Peter plays homed.
Yeah, Mahoe is probably, I think, the best balance between score and leave. But none of the choices, as long as they double one of the big tiles and hit the double and hit the star, like, they're all going to be pretty close.
Yeah, but those slight differences between those plays can sometimes be the extra edge that is needed against this top level competition. You used to see what David does here. So, for instance, he can double his X with an EX play, but he may be tempted to just simply play TEXT through the E in homed, which very nicely cleans up his rack, leaving PET blank, and will leave him in great shape to bingo on the next turn.
Text is relatively straightforward now. Resolve the rack, PT blank.
Yep, and 20 points is nothing to sneeze at.
It's a good general principle that when you have the blank, you want to bingo with it as soon as possible, so you should play pretty aggressively to clean up those duplicates.
Oh, interesting. I would have played downwards and parallel to maximise the score.
So that's 20 for David Eldar and 30 for Peter Armstrong at this juncture. And yeah, David Eldar's choice to keep the vowel seems to have paid off, as he drew 3 more consonants, but they are not copies of each other, so it will be his good fortune on the next turn.
Peter just double checking the score of text. Few options here, maybe Karma, K-A-M-A across the top of text, or maybe Panax down the side, keeping K-E-D.
I don't think there's anything through the O that's whiz bang, so yeah, one of the overlaps with the X, or one of the plays with the X is probably going to score best.
He has a number of plays that are very, very similar here. But it looks like the one that Quackle likes best is Powaka through the O, leaving a nice END leave. Comma scores considerably better than that, but the PEND is a little bit more unbalanced. It is a very close call between these plays, though.
The two Benjamins were homed as well, dishomed and fat homed.
Yeah, I feel like after Powaka, when if you look at the board, it's not very friendly unless you're holding an S. Really, the horizontal lane ending in the D, ending in ED into homed is about the only place you're gonna play a bingo, really, that doesn't involve an S.
Simply PAK parallel to the HO on either side, actually, is pretty similar to Powaka as well. It scores 1 point more. The difference between these two plays and comma is all within a half a point, according to Quackle. It's almost a toss-up.
Is he considering... I don't know, he wouldn't just play Cam, would he? You have to put the A on.
Yeah, Camo would probably be better than Cam.
It's 10 extra points. Your leave isn't 10 points better by adding an A.
No.
PK Keha is not quite as good a play because it burns all the vowels,
But
but
he
it is
has
a nice
played
word.
Cam. He has just played Cam.
Sometimes you get too enamored.
Splintered, immediate. I wonder if David played that quickly to try to upset Peter. You taking all the time over that? Right, bang, there's my bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to get distracted by, having things balanced and not realize that 8 or 10 points is worth taking when playing Kama versus Cam.
It looks like Cam may have just blocked his pendency.
Possibly. Yeah.
Always frustrating when that happens. You've made a play and you see, oh, if I hadn't just done that, this spot would be available. Of course, it's not as simple as that because you wouldn't necessarily have played off those exact tiles and drawn exactly what you have if not for that play. But it's easy to get caught up in those kind of questions.
Yeah, he's changing his move from splintered to pelotons.
Oh, interesting.
So as to not leave the S, I guess.
Yeah, it's a lot more defensive.
Mm-hmm.
A lot fewer floaters.
Another thing to notice is that even though the E is open, by having it at the middle of the board, you can fit an 8 through it in any position. Whereas when it's further to the top of the board like this, you can only play a bingo with an E if it is in the middle or the beginning of the word, not near the end of the word. Same for the floating P. So it does somewhat reduce the probability chances that the opponent is going to have an 8-letter word through that particular letter.
So David Eldar now on 96.
Yeah, we have an update from the other game. Nigel's ahead 205 to 168, but he has another bonus that it looks like it's coming down next turn. So he has the step up on Paul Gallen, and this would be an elimination match for Paul. So we'll keep everybody posted on the status of the other final.
Meanwhile, Eldar has drawn the second blank. Peter has... pedancy isn't a word. Pendancy isn't either.
Oh, is it pendency with ease?
He does have end cap across from the T of text.
Yes, pendency is only with the E's, not the A. My mistake there before.
Or maybe just pay across the top of pelotons now. CEND kills all the floaters. In fact, yeah. That's a real board shutter.
Yeah, we have, in addition to the playoffs in the A division that we've been showing on the stream, in the B division of the World Championship, we've also had knockout rounds, and we now have 2 finalists who will be playing for the B division title tomorrow morning. Is Mirza Taha and Danielle Sanula, both from Pakistan, I believe. So that will be exciting to see those two play for the title of the second division here in Torquay.
And Peter's playing the strong play Decay, which scores well and gives him some open lanes also for his other P on his rack to come down possibly in the future.
David playing immediately Whiny.
Yes, David with the three-eyed monster on his rack. Sometimes you can't fix all of that right away, but you just have to keep making some progress toward it.
So the scores now: Peter Armstrong on 81 and David Eldar on 126.
Yeah, to be fair though, this is a fairly simple board position in that there's not a lot of places to score points, and especially looking at a 3-eye rack like that, it's what else are you going to do? You're going to take advantage of that Y that's been put next to the triples. You're going to play one of your I's. You're going to play the V or the W. And, you know, the W is going to be a worse bingo tile than a V. So, yeah, it's a pretty... once you've kind of analyzed the board, it's a pretty quick, instant sort of play. There's not really many other things that are plausible that you'll be considering.
Mm-hmm. So Peter's looking at his rack with a WGP and AEE here. And one nice spot he has actually is off of the blank O. He can stick his W up there to make the word walk and make DEW going across, which kind of nicely cleans up the biggest problem with his rack. PG has a little bit of anti-synergy, but they actually go pretty well with the other tiles in the pool right there. That's a decent way to score a few points and sort of temporize, not really change the board situation all that much. It's an interesting thing because a lot of times you think if you're behind on the score, not that Peter's very far behind at this point, that you need to create some openings to give yourself more comeback chances, but that's not always that true. Sometimes if the board is relatively quiet, then simply scoring what you can, grooming your rack a little bit, can leave a situation where the opponent can't actually score a whole lot, so they can't get a lot more distance from you. And you can sort of hang around at that point as long as you've still got some open lanes on the board as it exists.
Notable, of course, we'd like to see the F going down soon, and 3Ts have gone so fat-homed, may not get played, but 2D's gone for Dishamed.
You see what Peter has in mind here. He's lined up his G and W up at the front of his rack and kind of had his hands on those tiles for a bit as if he was thinking of words involving the two of them. One possibility is Gwine through the eye, but it doesn't seem to really score that much. And leaves a slightly too vowel-heavy leave. Again, this is a good example of when your rack is this flexible, you should have plays that don't have to leave you with a bad vowel-heavy leave here. So if that's what you're planning on, sort of, again, you want to look for other options and see how you can get it to be a little bit better.
Well, he's got EPW positioned over on the left. Does that mean he's considering a change?
Doesn't seem like a situation where you'd want to change. There's places not to score a ton, but at least to do something.
Yeah.
Even do and walk is like 19.
Yeah. I mean, he could play Pew's, P-E-W-S, to the side, which does leave a very nice G-A-N-E leave, and also maybe dekes David into thinking that he has an S for Spews. It is a gamble to do something like that, but sometimes it can distract the opponent into making a suboptimal choice because they're concerned about the hook there.
It seems a little desperate to do when it's the first couple turns of the game and you're only down 40.
Yeah, I don't think it's a risk that needs to be taken here, but I was thinking of what could be done with PEW, and I maybe he has something else in mind, but it hasn't come to me yet what he was thinking.
I think he's getting due ready to be played.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's only got 13 minutes left on his clock. We're only a couple of moves in, so he needs to be careful about how he's managing his time. Eldar on 21, and he's played pretty quickly, so I imagine he's going to continue to be played fairly quickly at the moment because the board isn't conducive to having a lot of options. Eldar's going to have something like VoIP if Dew isn't played.
Voice over Internet Protocol.
Yes, indeed. Highly appropriate.
That's the magic that allows you to hear us right now.
It's an interesting one there because VoIP really does clear up the rack, gets rid of the V. So Dew would have a double effect. It would.
Is he thinking about Pew? He's picking it up again now.
He's played Wipe.
Wipe.
Yeah. Chris, Wipe.
Hello?
This is an interesting one. I mean, it takes the DRS hooks, letters he does not have yet, but he wants to have that volatility for the future. It does seem like he's just maximizing playing for leave at this point, because the AEGN is the most bingo-prone leave he could have given himself. And often if you don't have very good scoring opportunities, that can be a good thing to do, especially early in the game when you've got some open space for your bingos.
Yeah, and that W that he's blocked is a pretty crummy bingo tile, so that's not really as much of a concern.
So David was very happy to throw down VoIP quickly.
And yeah, I think David is definitely fast playing him. And it seems to be working as Peter's approaching 12 minutes.
Yeah. And again, you can also say with David having such tough racks, he didn't have a whole lot to think about. He needed to get rid of that V and duplicate I quickly.
Peter's top score would appear to be something like nonage down the left-hand side. That does blow the rack up. 26, but I mean the scores are 92 to Peter Armstrong and 147 to David, so there's 55 in it.
Yeah, I'd probably play long. Nonage.
Maybe nonage from the N of Winey, keeping AN. 23 versus 26.
Yeah, that's a pretty close call between those. I would personally angle toward keeping the more balanced leave with AN for an only 3-point difference there, especially this early in the game as you're starting to open things up. You want to give yourself the maximum chance to get that bingo.
Although playing nonage to the left, you're still also leaving plays down from the N of Winey. Anagen. Going to play a new word. There we go. Showing that he's studied his new Collins words this year.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It is a new word, but it seems like it's just slightly worse than nonage because you'd rather keep the A than the O.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this may be a case of something that you've learned recently. You play more freely, and well.
Ah, very nice by David playing Neveful, making the blank a V.
And playing it instantly and putting Peter back on his clock as he's still drawing tiles.
And that's impressive because a lot of David's quick plays before were plays that he probably had lined up before Peter had made his play, and he saw that the dynamism of the board hadn't changed a whole lot. It was still the play he wanted to make. But this is clearly one. There wasn't the open N for him to play at the bottom. Well, I guess there was the N off of Winey, so maybe he was already thinking of the word for that. And then suddenly able to throw it down in a place that scores even more into the triple. So that's 80 points for David, taking him to a score of 227 to 118.
And that went kind of...
27 to 118.
And that went kind of not to plan as far as Peter drawing to that O. Did pick up an S, but seeing the second blank come down when you're facing a comeback that you need to put together is pretty deflating.
So this is an interesting point to make here, actually, is that if he'd played nonage instead of anagen, it would have been slightly better, but it wouldn't have made a huge difference in his rack here. He would have FAISTUU, which is still not great. But you can see the difference between if he'd played nonage in the other position, leaving AN. The thing about those is not just that you're building toward a bingo, but it also provides you a little bit of insurance against bad draws. Even in the case that you draw a bad draw, if you've got an A and an N on your rack, you're likely to sort of avoid the worst possible racks you could get.
So he could be sitting there now with Fustian. Which, as we all know, can be extended with rum on the front. So if your opponent ever starts with Fustian, fish for rum, because even if you lose, you can tell everyone about it. Eldar appropriately needing an E for Rivieras. But Neveful has been
Challenged.
That will give an extra 5.
Put David Eldar at 232.
So yes, the Riviera is the name of the conference center this event is happening at, so it would indeed be an appropriate play.
Apparently Nigel has bonused with eruptive and erection and is now leading 455 to 332.
Wow. Eruptive appropriately missed by Imad against Nigel.
Yeah.
So it's Eldar's banana against Nigel's eruptive erection. Possibly in the final. Yep. It's explosive stuff.
So there's a interesting choice for Peter here. One is that he could play Houf, H-O-U-F, or H-O-U-F-S off of the H and homed, either taking the points now or setting up a big S-hook for himself. Oh, he's lining up Houf, too. He's thinking about it. This is the type of thing, there's obviously a couple S's unseen, but considering how much he's trailing by, he may want that dynamism of that kind of threat.
Yeah, 2 S's unseen from his point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously both the blanks have gone.
And indeed, he's playing it.
And it could be said that after the way the last game turned out, and the way that David Eldar, pulled both blanks early and hit bingos, and Peter's maybe a little bit on tilt. So it's certainly a reasonable play at this point, but also he might be more inclined to take bigger risks than otherwise.
He's down by 100-ish, though. I don't think it's an unreasonable risk here.
The score now is Peter Armstrong 132. So there's exactly 100 in it with the bad challenge. Peter does now have bonus.
Nitrous, he has Turions. So, yes, David is holding an S and will most likely hit the Houf spot, but it does look like there's a good chance that Peter could play a bonus afterward if he can find a spot to fit it on the board.
Needful takes an S, I think.
Ah.
So I think it means handful. I say I think it means. I looked it up, so I know it means a handful.
But considering that Peter challenged Needful, do you think he'll dare challenge, hook the S on it too?
Probably not. And that might be the only place that it plays, because I don't see anything else at the moment. But David taking the highest score with buyers. Centurions.
Even if he's not sure if it's good, he may go on the reasoning that he has to be a riverboat gambler here. And he's trailing, he may need to just try it and see if it works.
Well, the score's now 132 to 271, so he's got to play a bonus, really. I mean, if he doesn't play Nitrous here...
And David has straightened out his rack pretty well, despite the 2-hour leave.
Yeah.
So the score is now 271 for David and 132 for Peter.
Does that include the 5 for the challenge?
It's it's 276.
You're right. I
To
forgot
Eldar.
about that.
Yep. 276. He's playing it, and you've got to say, it's good logic. You've got no choice. Does that leave... Oh, a Droito, yeah. So... Unfortunately for Peter, well, that was a good play, and Eldar hasn't held it. He's going to play a Droito.
Droito goes down immediately, and David Eldar is still over 20 minutes on his clock,
So
with about 22 tiles in the bag.
Peter Armstrong on 202, David Eldar on 348.
Yes, I think David is illustrating very well here that the best defense is a good offense. He got an early lead, and he has been simply extending it, continuing to play for his scores and balanced leaves, and keep on just playing basic equity Scrabble and not worrying so much about defense or anything like that.
Although there's an opportunity here for Peter to open up a second 9 timer.
Play Zeta.
Yep. ZEDA opens up the second 9 timer, so he's got both the V at the top, which is not that useful, and the A.
Yes, we saw that from Paul in the last game. It's often a good strategy if you're trailing by a lot and there's a triple open to, rather than take it, open up another one to just create maximum chaos and hope to get lucky and that the opponent covers the wrong one. Of course, hard to know what Peter is thinking now, because as he is wont to do sometimes, he tends to leave several of his letters in all different orientations on his rack.
He's probably thinking, I wish I hadn't had that vodka. maybe he's looking at Avo. Sorry, Arvo. Top left to set up the Z.
Seems like it's a little too consonant heavy for what you would want with the Z on your rack. But it's a clever idea to set something like that up.
But it's never going to work, is it? It's just not going to work. I think he does want to open up that 9-timer. I think the Zeta play is probably worth doing. Actually, Zoba's even better.
Zoba's not a word, is it?
Well, no, apart from that.
Zobo is a word with 2 O's. I
Right.
wonder if that's what Peter is mixing up here. Hopefully he's not actually going to try to play Zoba, because that would be worth 0.
Well, he took the chance with Needfuls, didn't he? So he might as well.
Peter's down almost to 4 minutes left.
Yeah, that's also going to be a factor, I think.
The tile bag is still quite full. 22 in the bag. Which means probably about 5 more turns or so for... No, probably about 3 or 4 more turns for each player before we get to the end game.
Seems to me that the best play for Peter would be to sneak an extra N onto his rack to play botanized through that T in nitrous.
Yeah, but you don't really want to play a 70 or 80 point bingo right now, do you? When you're 100 points down, you need something huge. And Zeta doesn't actually block the double-double. So everything about it is great. There's also 5... No, there's not 5 E's unseen. The 4 E's unseen from his point of view. And he's playing a Vise. The Vise. 51.
He does score a lot of points, but yeah, it doesn't seem to create quite the type of volatile board he wants.
Yeah, and where the Z was placed gives back a huge score.
Very quickly. Immediately.
Quickly and mercilessly. Peter Armstrong on 253 and David Eldar on 414.
Peter is now down under the 3-minute mark, while David has almost 20 minutes still on his clock.
Any benefit in playing the S on China as well? To stop any ER opening bonuses or ESs? Get one more tile gone?
Well, it's a good question, because he did leave all consonants there with the JMS leave. But I imagine, too, that that S could be a handy bailout thing later. It's not a super great board for S's, but yeah, I wouldn't particularly be worried from David's point of view, because even a bingo down there is not going to be enough from Peter to catch him up.
I guess possibly it's avoiding Peter making an S setup like that.
Yes.
Without you having one.
Yep. And now David will immediately play Jaws.
Yeah. Done. Dusted.
Done and done.
The score's now 275 to Peter Armstrong, 456 to David Eldar. This is a bit of a slaughter. And yeah, David's drawing out good tiles now to keep going. And the bag is empty. No, the bag's not empty. Close
6.
to. Yeah.
Well, Peter does have a bonus now, but it's
Yeah.
not going to be nearly enough to get him in the game.
No, this is just accepting that you've lost. Yeah, outright it. Get it over with. Job done. So unfortunately, there won't be an American in this year's final.
Congrats to David Eldar.
Yeah, played well. I'm impressed that he didn't challenge Needfuls.
And David's in a nice position, too, of finishing his best of 5 series game early, it looks like. So he'll have a little extra time to take off before they start the final match, depending on how the things go between Paul and Nigel.
Yeah. We've heard that the game has finished between Paul and Nigel. We'll wait and find out what the result is. David is playing out now as a formality.
Peter also stuck with the Q.
No, he's got a spot for it.
He's got Cade, yeah.
It really doesn't matter at this point, though. It's just arithmetic.
So 482 to David Eldar, 340 to Peter Armstrong right now.
Yep, and it looks like it's going to be a rematch for our final because Nigel has beaten Paul Gallen 5-5-1 to 3-8-2.
So yes, it was 2 years ago that David and Nigel faced off in the quarterfinal because David had just managed to get into the playoffs in the 8 spot. So they only played a best-of-3 match. And David upset Nigel as the #1 seed in that tournament and later went on to win the World Championship. This time, it looks like they'll be facing off in a best-of-5 final match.
Oh, he's just set up David to have a really high outscore. Is that an apology for calling the director over for a recount? It is. I think it must be. There's no other reason to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, well played to both players. Getting to the semi-final is itself quite difficult. So
Final score is David Eldar 531 and Peter Armstrong 359. So congratulations to both David Eldar and Nigel Richards for making it to the final match.
That's not the final score. Quackle doubles the EIQ.
Oh, yeah.
So actually the final score was a 371 to Peter Armstrong, 519 to David Eldar.
So I imagine we're going to have a short break here and resume...
tomorrow morning.
Oh, tomorrow morning, that's right, yes. We're having a long break.
Yeah.
Before we resume tomorrow for the finals matches.
After a short 17-hour break.
Yes.
Starting at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
10 o'clock UK time.
After a short 16-hour break.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, well done to Peter Armstrong and well done to Paul Gallen. It's difficult to get this far and come up short, but there's still a lot to be said and a lot of pride to be taken in making the semifinals of the World Championship.
So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we will be back tomorrow morning with hopefully a very exciting best-of-5 match between two of the world's top players who have both won world championships and been ranked #1, #2 in the world.
Yeah, I think so.